Warriors, hail. Welcome to our hall. Before we begin, I call upon all true followers of Odin to join our ranks, so make sure to subscribe to the channel to support our legion. As you can see, our channel is new, and every warrior is crucial to our journey. Subscribe to strengthen our horde and make our battle cry echo across all lands. Also, tell us in the comments where you're from. Do we have battle brothers from the northern or southern lands? I want to get to know our brotherhood. Raise your mugs and toast with us by clicking the like button. Do all of this because together, we will conquer not just lands, but Valhalla itself. All because the salty spray of the sea stung my eyes as I stood at the bow of our longship, the Wave Cleaver. My hands gripped the carved dragon figurehead, my knuckles white with tension. Behind me, the familiar shores of Norway were fading into the mist, becoming nothing more than a memory. Bjorn, how much longer must we endure this madness? The voice of my friend, Leif, carried over the sound of crashing waves. I turned to face him, seeing the worry etched on his weathered face. As long as it takes, Leif. Odin guides our path to new lands and new glory. Leif spat over the side of the ship. Odin's path seems to lead us straight into hell's embrace. I couldn't blame him for his fears. We had been at sea for weeks, our supplies dwindling and our hopes fading with each passing day. But I couldn't let the crew see my own doubts. "Have faith, old friend," I said, clasping his shoulder. "The gods test us, but they will not abandon us." As if in answer to my words, a great cry went up from the stern of the ship. Storm approaching. I rushed to the back of the longship, my heart pounding. On the horizon, dark clouds were gathering, promising a tempest unlike any we had faced before. "All hands," I bellowed. "Secure the cargo and prepare for rough seas." The crew scrambled into action, tying down anything that could be washed overboard. I took my place at the steering oar, my muscles tensing as I prepared to battle the very elements themselves. The storm hit us with the fury of Thor's hammer. Waves as tall as mountains threatened to swallow us whole, while lightning split the sky and thunder shook our very bones. For hours we fought against nature's wrath, each moment a struggle for survival. "Bjorn," Leif's voice barely carried over the howling wind. "We can't take much more of this." I gritted my teeth, my arms burning with the effort of keeping the ship on course. "We must, for our families, for our future." Just when it seemed we would be overwhelmed, I heard a sound that chilled me to my core. The crack of splintering wood echoed across the deck. "The mast," someone screamed. "It's breaking." I watched in horror as our proud mast, carved from the mightiest oak in Norway, began to sway dangerously. If it fell, we would be at the mercy of the sea. "Axes," I commanded. "Cut it loose before it takes us down." Men rushed forward with their weapons, hacking at the ropes and supports. With a great groan, the mast toppled over the side, disappearing into the churning waters. As suddenly as it had begun, the storm began to subside. The waves calmed, and the wind died down to a gentle breeze. We had survived, but at what cost? I slumped to the deck, exhaustion overtaking me. Leif crawled to my side, his face pale but determined. "We live to sail another day," he said, managing a weak smile. I nodded, too tired to speak. As the clouds parted, revealing a sky full of stars, I noticed something strange. Ribbons of light danced across the heavens, green and purple and white. "By the gods," Leif whispered. "What sorcery is this?" I stared in awe at the spectacle above us. "Not sorcery, my friend. A sign." Word spread quickly through the crew, and soon every eye was turned skyward. The ethereal light seemed to beckon us onward, pointing the way to our destiny. Astrid, our vulva and seer, approached me with reverence in her eyes. "Bjorn, this is surely a message from the Allfather himself. Odin guides our way." I nodded solemnly. "Then we shall follow where he leads us." The next few days passed in a blur of repairs and renewed determination. The loss of our mast forced us to rely on oars alone, but the crew's spirits were high. They whispered amongst themselves about the lights in the sky, convinced that we were chosen by the gods for a great purpose. As dawn broke on the 5th day after the storm, a cry rang out from the lookout. "Land ho!" I rushed to the bow, my heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. After so long at sea, the sight of land was almost too much to believe. But as we drew closer, my excitement turned to confusion. This was not the lush green land we had hoped for. Instead, a barren volcanic landscape loomed before us. Great plumes of steam rose from the earth, and black sand beaches stretched as far as the eye could see. "What manner of place is this?" Leif asked, coming to stand beside me. I shook my head, at a loss for words. "I know not, but it is land, and it is ours for the taking." As we approached the shore, I could see doubt and fear on the faces of my crew. This harsh land was not what they had risked their lives for. I raised my voice, infusing it with all the confidence I could muster. "My friends, my warriors, the gods have led us here for a reason. This land may seem unwelcoming, but it is untamed, unspoiled. Here, we can build a new life, free from the constraints of our old home. Here, we can become legends." A cheer went up from the crew, hesitant at first but growing in strength. As the keel of our ship ground against the black sand, I was the first to leap onto the shore. I reached for my axe, the weapon that had seen me through countless battles. With all my strength, I brought it down, burying the blade deep in the frozen ground. "I, Bjorn Ironside, claim this land in the name of our people," I roared. "Let all who come after know that we were the first, the bravest, the strongest." The crew erupted in cheers, rushing to join me on the beach. Men and women alike fell to their knees, kissing the ground despite its harsh nature. Astrid approached me, her eyes wild with visions. "Bjorn, I have seen our future here. It will not be easy. Great hardships await us, but also great triumphs. This land will forge us anew, make us stronger than we ever were before." I nodded, taking in her words. "Then we shall meet those hardships head-on, as we always have." As the sun began to set on our first day in this new land, I stood apart from the others, watching as they began to set up our first camp. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier on my shoulders. Leif joined me, his face etched with concern. "What troubles you, my friend? We have reached land just as you promised." I sighed, gesturing to the alien landscape around us. "This place, Leif, it's nothing like we expected. How can we hope to survive here, let alone thrive?" Leif was quiet for a moment, then spoke with a wisdom that surprised me. "The oak that grows in the shadow of a mountain becomes stronger than the one that grows in a sheltered valley. Perhaps the gods brought us here not for an easy life, but for a life that will make us greater than we ever imagined." His words struck a chord within me, and I felt my resolve strengthen. "You're right, old friend. We didn't come all this way for an easy life. We came to forge our own destiny." As night fell, I gathered the entire crew around a great bonfire. The flames cast flickering shadows on their faces, a mix of excitement and apprehension visible in their eyes. "My people," I began, my voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We stand at the edge of a new world, a world that is ours to shape as we see fit. The journey here was hard, and the days ahead will be harder still. But we are Vikings, children of the North. We fear neither man nor beast, neither fire nor ice. This land may be harsh, but so are we." A cheer went up from the assembled crowd, growing louder with each word. "Tomorrow we begin the work of building our new home. We will face challenges we've never imagined, but we will face them together. And when our children's children speak of this day, they will say that this was the moment when legends were born." The roar of approval that followed shook the very ground beneath our feet. As I looked out over the faces of my people, I saw fear replaced by determination, doubt transformed into resolve. That night, as I lay under the stars of our new home, I offered a silent prayer to Odin. "All-Father, you have led us here for a reason. Grant us the strength to fulfill whatever destiny awaits us in this strange land." As if in answer, A cool wind blew across the campsite, carrying with it the promise of adventures yet to come. Whatever trials lay ahead, I knew that we would face them as we always had, together, with courage in our hearts and steel in our hands. The icy wind howled relentlessly, cutting through our furs and chilling us to the bone. Our hastily constructed shelters groaned under the assault of the elements, a constant reminder of our precarious situation in this alien land. Bjorn. Leif's voice barely carried over the gale. The eastern wall of the longhouse is buckling. I rushed to his side, squinting against the driving snow. The wooden planks we'd salvaged from our ship were indeed bowing inward, threatening to collapse at any moment. "Everyone, brace the wall," I shouted, my voice hoarse from days of shouting orders. Men and women alike scrambled to push against the failing structure, their faces etched with determination and fear. As we fought against the wind, I caught sight of Astrid, our vulva, standing alone at the edge of our settlement. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving in silent prayer or perhaps a vision of what was to come. Once the immediate crisis had passed, I approached her. "What do you see, Astrid? What future awaits us in this frozen hell?" She turned to me, her eyes clouded with worry. "The gods test us, Bjorn. This winter will claim many lives, but those who survive will be forged anew, stronger than ever before." Her words weighed heavily on me as I surveyed our meager camp. Food was already running low, and the bitter cold made hunting nearly impossible. Something had to be done. The next morning I gathered a small group of our strongest warriors. "We must venture into the wilderness," I announced. "Our supplies won't last the winter, and we know nothing of this land or its dangers." Leif, ever my loyal friend, was the first to step forward. "I'm with you, Bjorn. Better to die with an axe in hand than waste away in these huts." 5 others joined us. Gunnar, our best tracker. Sigrid, a shield maiden of unparalleled skill. Halfdan, a young warrior eager to prove himself. And the brothers Ulf and Bjorn, as inseparable as they were formidable. As we prepared to leave, Astrid approached me once more. "Be wary, Bjorn Ironside," she warned. "This land is old and full of secrets. Not all its inhabitants will welcome us." With her cryptic warning ringing in my ears, we set out into the unknown. The landscape was unlike anything we had ever seen. Fields of black sand punctuated by steam vents and bubbling mud pots. In the distance, mountains of ice and fire loomed, a constant reminder of the volatile nature of our new home. For days we trudged through the harsh terrain, finding little in the way of game. What few animals we did encounter were strange and unfamiliar. Great shaggy beasts with curved horns, birds that swam instead of flew, and small furry creatures that burrowed in the snow. On the 4th day, as we huddled around a meager fire, Gunnar suddenly tensed. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, reaching for his bow. We all fell silent, straining our ears. At first I heard nothing but the wind, but then a low rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Weapons ready," I ordered, my hand tightening on my axe. From the mist emerged a beast unlike any we had ever seen. It was massive, easily the size of 3 men, with thick white fur and tusks that curved wickedly from its mouth. Its eyes gleamed with an almost human intelligence as it regarded us. "By the gods," Halfdan breathed. "What manner of creature is this?" The beast charged without warning, its thunderous footsteps shaking the very ground. We scattered, narrowly avoiding its initial rush. "Surround it!" I shouted, dodging a swipe from its massive paw. "Work together!" What followed was a desperate battle against a foe that seemed impervious to our weapons. Our swords and axes barely penetrated its thick hide, and it moved with a speed that belied its size. In the chaos, I saw Halfdan go down, the beast's tusk tearing a gash in his side. Without thinking, I leapt onto the creature's back, driving my axe deep into the base of its skull. The beast roared in pain and fury, thrashing wildly. I clung on, my muscles screaming with the effort. "Now!" I yelled. "Strike now!" My companions didn't hesitate. They swarmed the beast, attacking from all sides. Finally, with a great shuddering groan, the creature collapsed. As the dust settled, we gathered around our fallen foe, exhausted but triumphant. "This will feed the entire settlement for weeks," Sigrid said, a note of awe in her voice. "If we can get it back," Leif added grimly, gesturing to Halfdan's prone form. I knelt beside the young warrior, relieved to find him still breathing. "We'll make a sled," I decided. "Drag both Halfdan and our prize back to camp. This hunt may have cost us, but it will save many lives." The journey back was arduous, but the sight of our settlement on the horizon filled us with renewed strength. As we approached, I could see figures rushing out to meet us, their cries of joy carrying on the wind. "Bjorn, you've returned." It was my wife, Hilda, her face a mixture of relief and concern as she took in our battered state and strange cargo. "We have food," I announced to the gathering crowd. "Enough to see us through the worst of the winter." Cheers erupted from the assembled settlers, but I held up a hand for silence. Our victory came at a cost. Halfdan is gravely wounded, and we've seen but a fraction of the dangers this land holds. We must remain vigilant and united if we're to survive. As the others set about preparing our hard-won feast, I retreated to the quiet of our hut. The reality of our situation weighed heavily upon me. We had food for now, but our supplies were still dangerously low. Hilda found me there, her warm presence a balm to my troubled soul. "What troubles you, my love?" "You've brought hope back to our people," I sighed, pulling her close. "Hope is a fragile thing, Hilda. This winter is far from over, and I fear we've only scratched the surface of the challenges that await us." Before she could respond, a commotion outside drew our attention. We emerged to find the ground itself shaking beneath our feet. "Earthquake," someone shouted, panic spreading through the camp like wildfire. I watched in horror as fissures opened in the earth, swallowing up supplies and threatening to tear our shelters apart. "Everyone, to the shore," I commanded, my voice barely audible over the rumbling. As we huddled together on the black sand beach, a new sound reached our ears, a deep, resonant roar that seemed to shake the very air around us. I turned to see a sight that would be seared into my memory forever. The mountain that had loomed in the distance since our arrival was now alive with fire. Great plumes of ash and smoke billowed into the sky while rivers of molten rock poured down its slopes. "Surtur himself rises against us," Ulf whispered, his face pale with fear. I placed a hand on his shoulder, steeling myself to be the leader my people needed. "No, my friend, this is not the end, but a new beginning. We are witnessing the very forging of this land, and in its fires we too shall be remade." My words seemed to calm the worst of their fears, but as we slowly made our way back to what remained of our camp, I could see the toll this latest disaster had taken on their spirits. The weeks that followed were a blur of constant struggle. We rebuilt what we could, rationed our dwindling supplies, and huddled together for warmth as the days grew shorter and the nights longer. It was during one of these endless nights that the whispers began. At first, I dismissed them as tricks of the wind or the product of overwrought imaginations. But as more and more of our people reported hearing strange voices and eerie sounds in the darkness, I could no longer ignore the possibility that we were not alone. "Perhaps it's the hidden folk," Astrid suggested one night as we gathered around the central fire. "The Landvetter, spirits of the land. They may not take kindly to our presence here." Murmurs of unease spread through the gathered settlers. I could see fear taking hold once more, threatening to unravel all we had accomplished. "Listen to me," I said, rising to address them all. "Whether these sounds come from spirits, beasts, or our own minds, we cannot let fear rule us. We are the children of Odin, descendants of giants and gods. This land may test us, but it will not break us." As I spoke, I saw resolve harden in their eyes. We had come too far, endured too much to falter now. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind and those strange, distant whispers, I made a silent vow. We would not merely survive this winter, we would thrive. And when the spring came, we would be ready to claim this land as our own, no matter what challenges it might hold. For we were Vikings, and this was to be our saga, a tale of hardship and triumph, of a people forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the icy winds of a new world. The first hint of spring came like a whisper, a subtle shift in the air that promised change. As the relentless grip of winter began to loosen, a newfound energy swept through our settlement. The long night was finally ending, and with it, the worst of our trials. Or so we thought. I stood at the edge of our camp, watching as the first green shoots pushed through the melting snow. Leif approached, his weathered face creased with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "What now, Bjorn?" he asked, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We've survived the winter, but this land is still a mystery to us." I nodded, feeling the weight of leadership on my shoulders. "Now, old friend, we explore, we learn, we make this place our home." With renewed purpose, I gathered a small group of our hardiest warriors and most skilled trackers. Our mission was clear: to venture out and map the surrounding area, to find resources that would sustain us in the seasons to come. As we set out, the landscape slowly revealed itself, shedding its white winter cloak. The black sand beaches gave way to fields of strange, spongy moss and hardy grasses. Steam rose from cracks in the earth, hinting at the fiery heart of this island. It was Sigrid, her keen eyes always alert, who first noticed the anomaly. "Bjorn," she called, pointing to a distant vale. "Do you see that mist?" I followed her gaze, noticing a thick fog that seemed out of place in the cool spring air. Curiosity piqued. We cautiously approached. The source of the mist soon became apparent: a series of pools, their waters steaming in the crisp air. The acrid smell of sulfur filled our nostrils as we drew closer. "By the gods!" Gunnar breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "The water, it's warm." Cautiously, I knelt by the nearest pool, dipping my hand into the water. It was indeed warm, almost hot to the touch. A memory stirred, tales of similar springs in distant lands. "Hot springs," I announced, a smile spreading across my face. "A gift from the earth itself." The significance of our discovery was not lost on any of us. In this harsh land, where warmth was as precious as gold, these springs could mean the difference between survival and prosperity. As we continued our exploration, mapping the location of the springs and other resources, a new challenge presented itself. On the third day of our expedition, we crested a hill to find ourselves face to face with another group of armed men. Tensions immediately flared, weapons half drawn on both sides. I raised my hand, signaling our group to hold. "Who are you?" I called out in Norse, hoping they would understand. "How came you to this land?" A tall man with a shock of red hair stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "I am Eric Thorvaldsson," he replied in our tongue. "We sailed here from Greenland, seeking new lands to settle. And you?" "Bjorn Ironside," I answered, relaxing slightly at the familiar language. "We came from Norway, driven by dreams and the will of the gods." Eric's eyes narrowed. "And do you claim this land as your own?" I could feel the weight of the moment, knowing my next words could lead to bloodshed or alliance. "We claim the right to live here, as do you, I suspect. Perhaps there is room enough for both our peoples, if we can find a way to coexist." A tense silence followed, broken only by the whisper of wind through the grass. Finally, Eric nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Your words are fair, Bjorn Ironside. Let us talk then, and see what future we might forge together." What followed was a cautious exchange of information and resources. We learned of Eric's journey from Greenland, of the challenges his people had faced in settling this new land. In turn, we shared our own experiences, the trials of our first winter and the discoveries we had made. As we parted ways, a tentative alliance formed between our groups. I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would shape the future of our settlement in ways we couldn't yet imagine. Returning to our camp, we were greeted with excitement at the news of the hot springs and the potential for trade and cooperation with Eric's people. But I knew that challenges still lay ahead. In the days that followed, I often found myself by the shores of a glacial river that cut through our territory. The icy waters teemed with fish, a vital food source for our growing settlement. It was on one such fishing expedition that disaster nearly struck. I stood on what I thought was solid ice, my spear poised to strike at a particularly large salmon. Without warning, a sickening crack split the air. "Bjorn!" Leif's panicked voice reached me just as the ice gave way beneath my feet. I plunged into the frigid water, the shock driving the air from my lungs. The current immediately began to pull me under the ice, away from the hole I had fallen through. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I fought against the river's grip. My lungs burned, screaming for air. Just as my strength began to fail, my hand brushed against something solid, a root or branch trapped in the ice. With the last of my energy, I pulled myself towards it, following its length until I found the edge of the ice. I broke the surface with a desperate gasp, clawing my way onto solid ground. Leif was there in an instant, pulling me further from the treacherous ice. "By Odin's beard," he panted, his face pale with fear. "I thought we'd lost you." As I lay there, coughing and shivering, I was struck by how quickly life could be snatched away in this unforgiving land. We had survived the winter, but the dangers were far from over. That night, as the settlement slept, I found myself unable to rest. The events of the day played over and over in my mind. The alliance with Eric's people, my near death in the icy river. What did it all mean for our future? My troubled thoughts were interrupted by Astrid, our vulva. She approached me, her eyes distant, as if seeing something beyond the physical world. "The gods have sent me visions, Bjorn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Great trials await us. Icy fire and ice, battles fought not just against men, but against the very land itself." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "What more can you tell me, Astrid? How can we prepare?" She shook her head, frustration evident in her furrowed brow. "The visions are unclear, fragmented. But one thing is certain, the path ahead will test us as never before. We must be ready for anything." As dawn broke, casting its pale light over our settlement, I gathered our people. The time had come to share what we had learned, both from our explorations and from Astrid's visions. "My friends, my family," I began, looking into each face before me. "We have survived the winter, but our greatest challenges may yet lie ahead. We have found allies, yes, but also new dangers. The land itself seems to test us at every turn." Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd, but I held up my hand for silence. "But we are not weak, nor are we alone. The gods watch over us, guiding our path. We have each other, our strength, our skills, our determination. Whatever trials await us, we will face them together." As I spoke, I saw resolve harden in their eyes, backs straightening, chins lifting with pride and determination. "We are the first," I continued, my voice rising with passion. "The first to brave these shores, to tame this wild land. Our names will be remembered in sagas for generations to come. Let us make those sagas tales of triumph, of a people who faced the impossible and emerged victorious." A cheer went up, echoing across the settlement and beyond, into the untamed wilderness that surrounded us. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and hope. Whatever the future held, alliance or conflict, prosperity or hardship, we would face it as one. As the noise died down and our people dispersed to their daily tasks, I found myself looking out over the land we now called home. The thaw had brought new life, new possibilities, but also new dangers. The true test of our mettle was just beginning. With a deep breath, I steeled myself for what was to come. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on our settlement, its heat a stark contrast to the bitter cold we had endured just months before. But with the warmth came new challenges. Our crops struggled in the volcanic soil, and game became increasingly scarce as both our clan and Eric's competed for the same limited resources. I stood at the edge of our territory watching as Eric's hunters returned with a large elk slung between them. It was the third such successful hunt this week, while our own hunting parties had returned empty-handed more often than not. Leif approached, his face etched with concern. "Bjorn, this can't continue. Our people grow hungry and restless. There are whispers of raiding Eric's stores." I sighed heavily, the weight of leadership bearing down on me. "We cannot resort to thievery, Leif. We are Vikings, not common criminals." "Then what would you have us do?" Leif's voice rose in frustration. "Watch our children starve while Eric's people feast?" Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the center of our settlement. We rushed to investigate, finding a tense standoff between our people and a group from Eric's clan. "These savages attacked us," one of Eric's men shouted, nursing a bloody nose. "We were merely foraging, and they fell upon us like wolves." Gunnar, one of our fiercest warriors, stepped forward, his axe gleaming in the sunlight. "Lies. You were well within our territory, stealing what rightfully belongs to us." The situation was a powder keg ready to explode. I pushed my way between the two groups, my voice ringing out with authority. "Enough. There will be no bloodshed here today. Return to your settlement," I commanded Eric's men. "I will speak with your leader myself." As the crowd dispersed, murmuring discontent, Astrid approached me, her eyes clouded with worry. "The gods are displeased, Bjorn. This conflict can only lead to ruin for both clans." I nodded grimly. "Then we must find a way to resolve it for all our sakes." The next day I set out for Eric's settlement, a small group of trusted warriors at my back. We were met at their borders by Eric himself, flanked by his own men. "Bjorn Ironside," Eric greeted me, his voice cool. "Have you come to apologize for your people's aggression?" I met his gaze steadily. "I've come to put an end to this conflict before it destroys us both. Our alliance has become strained, Eric. We cannot continue as we are." Eric's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose? Should we simply hand over our hard-earned resources to your starving clan?" The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my warriors tensing behind me, ready for a fight. But I had not come here for war. "I propose a challenge," I said, my voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Single combat, you and I. The victor's clan will have first rights to the disputed hunting grounds for the season." A murmur ran through both groups. Eric stroked his beard thoughtfully, considering my offer. "And if I refuse? Then we return to our own lands and pray that hunger doesn't drive us to more desperate measures," I replied honestly. For a long moment, Eric was silent. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Very well, Bjorn Ironside. I accept your challenge. We fight at dawn tomorrow, on the neutral ground between our settlements." As we made our way back to our own lands, Leif voiced his concerns. "Are you sure about this, Bjorn? Eric is a formidable warrior." I clasped his shoulder reassuringly. "It's our best chance to avoid all-out war, my friend. Besides," I added with a grin, "I've faced worse odds before." The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, both clans gathered on a flat expanse of land that lay unclaimed between our territories. The air was thick with tension as Eric and I stepped into the makeshift arena, our weapons at the ready. "May the gods favor the righteous," Eric intoned, raising his sword in salute. I mirrored his gesture with my axe. "And may our people find peace, whatever the outcome." With a roar, we charged at each other. The clash of steel on steel rang out across the battlefield as we traded blows. Eric was indeed a skilled fighter, his sword flashing like lightning as he pressed his attack. But I had not survived countless battles and the harsh winter of this new land to fall here. I weathered his assault, looking for an opening. When it came, I struck with all my might, my axe biting deep into his shield. The fight might have continued for hours, each of us evenly matched. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A blood-curdling screech split the air, freezing both Eric and me in our tracks. From the nearby woods, erupted a horde of creatures unlike anything we had ever seen. They were humanoid in shape, but their skin was a sickly blue-white, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Draugr! Someone screamed, and panic erupted among both clans. Without a word, Eric and I turned to face this new threat together. Back to back, we met the charge of these undead horrors. Our previous conflict forgotten, warriors from both clans joined the fray, forming a unified front against the supernatural assault. The battle was fierce and chaotic. These Draugr were unlike any foe we had faced before, shrugging off wounds that would have felled a mortal man. But we were Vikings, and we would not go down without a fight. I lost track of time as we battled, my world narrowing to the swing of my axe and the enemies before me. Gradually the tide began to turn. With a final, desperate push, we drove the remaining Draugr back into the woods from whence they came. As the dust settled, I found myself standing beside Eric, both of us bloodied but unbowed. He turned to me, a newfound respect in his eyes. "It seems the gods had other plans for our duel, Bjorn Ironside." I nodded, surveying the battlefield where our people now mingled, tending to each other's wounds regardless of clan affiliation. Perhaps this was their plan all along, to unite us against a common foe. Eric clasped my forearm in a warrior's grip. "Then let us honor their wisdom. Our people are stronger together than apart. From this day forward, let there be no more talk of your clan and my clan. We are one people, forged in battle against an enemy that would destroy us all." A cheer went up from the assembled warriors, the previous animosity forgotten in the wake of our shared victory. As we began the task of tending to our wounded and honoring our dead, a sense of true unity settled over our people for the first time since we had arrived on these shores. But our trials were not yet over. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, a lone figure emerged from the lengthening shadows. He was tall and lean, wrapped in a cloak that seemed to shift colors in the fading light. His face was hidden beneath a deep hood, but I could feel the weight of his gaze upon us. "Who goes there?" I called out, my hand tightening on my axe. The stranger stepped forward, pushing back his hood to reveal a face etched with age and wisdom. "I am Fafnir, a wanderer of these lands. I come with a warning for those who would make their home here." Eric and I exchanged glances before approaching the old man. "Speak then, Fafnir," Eric said. "What warning do you bring?" Fafnir's eyes seemed to bore into us as he spoke, his voice low and ominous. "You have faced but a taste of the dangers this land holds. The Draugr you fought today are but servants of a greater power, one that slumbers fitfully beneath the very ground you stand upon." A chill ran down my spine at his words. "What manner of power do you speak of, old man?" "An ancient evil," Fafnir replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "One that has slept for millennia, but now stirs, roused by the presence of new life on these shores. If it fully awakens, it will bring destruction, not just to your people, but to all the lands touched by the sea." Murmurs of fear rippled through the gathered crowd. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the unease in my heart. "Then tell us, Fafnir, how can we prevent this awakening? How do we protect our people?" The old man's gaze swept over all of us before settling back on me. "The task before you is great, Bjorn Ironside. You must unite not just your own people, but all who dwell in these lands. Only together can you hope to keep the Ancient One sleeping. But beware. For every step you take to safeguard your future, the evil will work to undo your efforts. The very land itself may turn against you." As Fafnir's words faded into the gathering darkness, I felt the weight of this new responsibility settle upon my shoulders. We had come to this land seeking a new home, a place to build our legacy. Now, it seemed, we had stumbled into a battle as old as the earth itself. I turned to face our people, no longer two separate clans, but a single, united force. "My friends," I began, my voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "We came to this land as explorers and settlers. Now, it seems, We must become its protectors as well. The road ahead will be difficult, filled with challenges we can scarcely imagine. But we are Vikings, descendants of gods and giants. We do not shrink from adversity. We rise to meet it. A cheer went up from the assembled warriors, their voices echoing across the battlefield. As I met Eric's gaze, I saw in his eyes the same determination that burned in my own heart. Whatever trials lay ahead, we would face them together. As night fell fully upon us, we made our way back to our now united settlement, the mysterious Fafnir melting away into the shadows, as silently as he had appeared. The future was uncertain, fraught with dangers both seen and unseen. But for the first time since we had set foot on these shores, I felt a true sense of purpose. Our saga was far from over. Indeed, it seemed the greatest chapters were yet to be written. The mist clung to the highlands like a shroud, obscuring our path and muffling the sounds of our expedition. I led our small group, consisting of Eric, Leif, Astrid, and a handful of our bravest warriors, through the treacherous terrain. The warnings of Fafnir still echoed in my mind, driving us to explore further into this mysterious land. "Bjorn," Leif called out, his voice barely above a whisper, "are you certain this is wise? We've ventured farther than any of our hunting parties." I paused, turning to face my old friend. "We must know what secrets this land holds, Leif. If we're to protect our people from the ancient evil Fafnir spoke of, we need allies, or at least knowledge." Eric nodded in agreement. "Bjorn speaks true. We cannot defend against what we do not understand." As we pressed on, the mist seemed to thicken, swirling around us in unnatural patterns. Astrid's eyes darted back and forth, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's power here," she murmured. "Old magic. Can you feel it?" Before I could respond, Gunnar called out from the front of our group, "Bjorn, Eric, you need to see this." We rushed forward, the mist parting before us like a curtain. What we saw stopped us in our tracks. Before us stood a stone arch, ancient and weathered, covered in runes unlike any we had ever seen. "By the gods," Eric breathed. "We're not the first to settle this land after all." I approached the arch, running my hand over the strange symbols. They seemed to pulse with a faint otherworldly light at my touch. "Astrid, can you make sense of these runes?" Our Volva stepped forward, her eyes scanning the ancient writing. "It's difficult. The language is old, older than any I've encountered, but I can grasp fragments. It speaks of guardians, protectors of the land." As if summoned by her words, a figure emerged from the mist beyond the arch. It was humanoid in shape, but there was something unmistakably otherworldly about it. Its skin seemed to shimmer, changing color like the northern lights, and its eyes held a wisdom that spoke of centuries. Our warriors reached for their weapons, but I held up a hand to stop them. "Wait," I commanded. "Let us not make enemies where we might find friends." The being regarded us silently for a long moment before speaking. Its voice was like the whisper of wind through ancient trees. "You are not of this land, yet you seek its secrets. Why have you come to this sacred place, mortals?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I am Bjorn Ironside. We come seeking knowledge and allies. Our people face a great threat, an ancient evil that slumbers beneath the earth." The being's eyes widened slightly at my words. "You speak of the Devourer. Its stirring has not gone unnoticed by the hidden people." "Hidden people?" Eric asked, stepping up beside me. "Is that what you call yourselves?" The being nodded slowly. "It is the name your kind has given us over the centuries. We are the guardians of this land, protectors of its ancient magics." Astrid moved closer, her voice filled with awe. "The stories are true then. The hidden folk, the land vet here. You're real." "As real as you, daughter of seers," the being replied. "But come. If you truly seek knowledge of the Devourer, you must see more than this gateway." With a gesture, the being turned and walked back through the arch. The mist swirled and parted, revealing a path that hadn't been there moments before. I exchanged glances with my companions. This was the moment of truth. Do we trust this otherworldly being and follow it into the unknown? We've come too far to turn back now, I said, making the decision. Stay alert, but let's see where this path leads us. We followed the being through the arch and into a world that defied explanation. The mist cleared, revealing a hidden valley teeming with life. Plants we had never seen before grew in abundance, their colors vibrant and unnatural. In the distance we could see structures that seemed to be part of the living landscape, pulsing with the same ethereal energy as the runes on the arch. More of the hidden people appeared as we walked, their curious eyes following our every move. Some looked almost human, while others took forms that reminded me of the creatures from our oldest myths, elves, dwarves, and beings I had no names for. "This is incredible," Leaf murmured, his earlier caution replaced by wonder. "Think of what this could mean for our people. The resources here alone could sustain us for generations." I nodded, but something in the air made me hesitate. There was a weight to this place, a sense of ancient power that demanded respect. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, my friend. We're guests here, and I suspect the hidden people do not give up their secrets lightly." As if in response to my words, our guide stopped and turned to face us. "You are perceptive, Bjorn Ironside. This valley is indeed rich in resources that could aid your people. But as you've guessed, such gifts come with a price." Eric stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "And what price would that be?" The being's gaze swept over our group before settling on me. "The devourer stirs, its hunger growing with each passing day. We have kept it at bay for millennia, but our power wanes. We need fresh blood, new guardians to take up the mantle of protection." I felt a chill run down my spine as I began to understand. "You want us to become guardians? To stay here in this valley?" "Not all of you," the being clarified, "but some must remain, to learn our ways, to become one with the land. Only then can you hope to stand against the devourer when it fully awakens." A heavy silence fell over our group as the implications sank in. To gain access to this valley and its resources, we would have to sacrifice some of our own people. They would have to leave behind everything they knew to become something other. Astrid was the first to speak. "I will stay," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. "My gifts as a vulva could be of use here, and there is so much I could learn." "Astrid, no," Leif protested. "We can't ask this of you." But I could see the determination in her eyes. This was no rash decision, but a calling she felt deep in her soul. "If I stay as well," Gunnar spoke up, surprising us all. "Would that be sufficient? 2 of us, to start?" Our guide seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "It would be a beginning. But know this. Those who choose to stay must do so of their own free will, and they must be prepared for a transformation that cannot be undone." I looked at Astrid and Gunnar, seeing the resolve in their faces. Then I turned to the rest of our group, noting the mix of awe, fear, and uncertainty in their expressions. This decision would change everything for our people. "Before we agree to anything," I said, turning back to our guide, "I need to know more. What exactly would be expected of those who stay? And what can we expect in return?" The being's form seemed to shimmer as it considered my questions. "Those who remain will undergo a process of attunement to the land. They will learn the old magics, the ways of communicating with the earth itself. In time, they will become like us, guardians of the balance between your world and the other world." "And in return," Eric pressed, "in return, your people will have access to this valley and its resources. We will share our knowledge of this land, its dangers, and its gifts. And when the time comes to face the devourer, you will not stand alone." I took a deep breath, weighing the enormity of this decision. On one hand, the resources and knowledge offered could ensure our people's survival and prosperity. On the other, we would be asking for an incredible sacrifice from those who stayed behind. "I need to consult with my people," I said finally. "This decision affects all of us, not just those here." The being nodded, a hint of approval in its otherworldly eyes. "A wise choice, Bjorn Ironside. You have until the next full moon to give us your answer. But know this, the longer you wait, the stronger the devourer grows." With those ominous words, the mist began to swirl around us once more. When it cleared, we found ourselves back at the stone arch, the hidden valley nowhere in sight. As we made our way back to our settlement, my mind raced with the implications of what we had seen and heard. The hidden valley could be our salvation, but at what cost? And could we trust these hidden people? Or were we walking into a trap? One thing was certain: the decision we faced would shape the future of our people for generations to come. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I steeled myself for the difficult conversations and choices that lay ahead. Our saga had taken an unexpected turn, venturing into realms of myth and magic I had never truly believed existed. But as a leader, I had to consider all options to protect and provide for our people. The hidden valley offered hope, but it also presented risks I couldn't ignore. As our settlement came into view, I resolved to gather our people and share what we had discovered. Together, we would decide our fate, whether to remain solely in the world we knew, or to embrace the unknown and forge a new path alongside the hidden people. Whatever choice we made, I knew our lives would never be the same. The ancient evil stirred beneath our feet, and time was running out. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over our settlement. The air was thick with tension and the scent of burning herbs. Our people had gathered in a great circle, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. At the center stood Astrid, her eyes closed in deep concentration as she prepared for the ritual that would change our fate forever. I stood at the edge of the circle, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. The decision had not been an easy one, but in the end, our people had agreed. We would make the sacrifice demanded by the hidden people in exchange for their knowledge and protection against the awakening evil. Eric approached me, his face etched with concern. "Are you certain about this, Bjorn? There must be another way." I shook my head, my voice low. "We've discussed this, old friend. I must be the one to go. As leader, I cannot ask others to take risks I'm not willing to face myself." He clasped my shoulder, his grip firm. "Then may the gods watch over you. We'll be waiting for your return." As the moon reached its zenith, Astrid's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. Her voice, when she spoke, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "It is time," she intoned. "Bjorn Ironside, step forward and prepare for your journey." Taking a deep breath, I moved to the center of the circle. Our people began to chant, a low rhythmic sound that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Astrid approached me, a bowl of shimmering liquid in her hands. "Drink," she commanded. "Let the essence of the land flow through you and guide your path." I took the bowl, the liquid within swirling with colors I had no names for. Without hesitation, I drank deeply. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The world around me began to blur and shift, reality itself seeming to bend and warp. "Go now," Astrid's voice echoed in my mind. "Follow the call of the mountain. Face the trials that await you." I stumbled forward, my feet carrying me of their own accord. The chanting of our people faded behind me as I made my way out of the settlement and into the wilderness beyond. Time lost all meaning as I journeyed, the landscape shifting in impossible ways around me. Finally, I found myself at the base of a great volcano, its peak wreathed in smoke and flame. A narrow path wound its way up the mountainside, disappearing into the haze. Taking a deep breath, I began to climb. The ascent was grueling, each step more difficult than the last. The air grew thick with ash and sulfur, making it hard to breathe. But still I pressed on, driven by an inexorable force I couldn't name. As I neared the summit, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. Cracks appeared in the rock, revealing the molten fire that flowed beneath. A voice ancient and terrible echoed in my mind. "Who dares to seek the heart of the mountain?" It boomed. Summoning all my courage, I called out, "I am Bjorn Ironside, leader of my people. I come seeking the power to protect them from the awakening evil." A rumbling laugh shook the mountain. "Many have come seeking power, mortal. Few have been worthy. Are you prepared to face the trials that await you?" "I am," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Then enter, Bjorn Ironside, and prove your worth." The rock face before me split open, revealing a cavern that pulsed with heat and light. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The first challenge came swiftly. I found myself surrounded by shadowy figures, each bearing the face of someone I knew. They whispered doubts and fears, their voices a cacophony of despair. "You're not strong enough," Leif's shadow hissed. "You'll doom us all," Eric's shade accused. "You should have stayed in Norway," my own father's ghost lamented. I closed my eyes, centering myself. "You are not real," I declared. "You are but shadows and doubts. I know my worth, and I know my purpose." With each word, the shadows faded, until I stood alone once more. The cavern shifted, and I found myself on a narrow bridge spanning a river of lava. At the far end stood a figure wreathed in flame, myself, as I might be, if I embraced the power offered without thought for the consequences. "Join with me," the fiery apparition called. Together we could rule not just our people, but all the lands touched by the sea. Why protect when we could conquer? For a moment I felt the pull of that promise. The power to shape the world as I saw fit, to never again fear hunger or defeat. But then I thought of our people, of the trust they had placed in me. "No," I said firmly. "Power without purpose is meaningless. I seek strength to protect, not to dominate." The fiery version of myself howled in rage, lunging forward. But as it reached me, it dissipated into harmless sparks. The final trial was the most difficult. I stood in a vast chamber, face to face with a being of pure energy. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as one of the hidden people, sometimes as a monster from our oldest legends. "You have come far, Bjorn Ironside," it said, its voice resonating through my very being. "But the greatest test is yet to come. To gain the power you seek, you must be willing to give up that which you value most." "I have already left behind my home, my old life," I argued. "What more can I give?" The being's form solidified, taking the shape of my wife, Hilda, her belly swollen with child. "Your future," it said softly, "the family you dream of, the legacy you hope to build. To truly become a guardian, you must be willing to sacrifice your own desires for the greater good." My heart clenched at the sight. The dream of settling down, of watching my children grow, it had been what drove me through all our hardships. Could I really give that up? But then I thought of our people, of the threat that loomed over not just us, but all who called this land home. I thought of the trust they had placed in me, and the responsibility that came with it. With a heavy heart, I nodded. "If that is the price, then I will pay it gladly. My people's future is more important than my own." The being smiled, a sad but proud expression. "You have passed the final test, Bjorn Ironside. You are indeed worthy." The chamber filled with blinding light, and I felt a surge of power, unlike anything I had ever experienced. When my vision cleared, I held in my hands an amulet, pulsing with the same energy I had felt in the hidden valley. "This artifact is a conduit," the being explained. "Through it, you can channel the power of the land itself. Use it wisely, for with great power comes great responsibility." I clasped the amulet around my neck, feeling its energy flow through me. "I understand," I said solemnly. "I will use this power to protect our people and this land." The being nodded, its form beginning to fade. "Remember, Bjorn Ironside, The trials you faced here are but a taste of what is to come. Stay true to your purpose, and you may yet save us all." With those words, the cavern dissolved around me. I found myself standing once more at the base of the volcano, the amulet warm against my chest. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Feeling both exhilarated and exhausted, I made my way back to our settlement. But as I approached, I realized something was amiss. The buildings looked different, more permanent. Fields had been planted where before there had been only wild grass. Leif was the first to spot me, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Bjorn?" he called out, his voice cracking. "By the gods, is it really you?" Others began to gather, their faces a mixture of joy and shock. Eric pushed through the crowd, his beard now streaked with gray. "We thought you lost to us," he said, embracing me fiercely. "It's been months since you left for the mountain." I staggered back, stunned. "Months? But I was only gone for a single night." Astrid approached, her eyes fixed on the amulet at my throat. "Time flows differently in the realm of trials," she explained. "For you, it may have been hours. For us, the seasons have turned." As the reality of the situation sank in, I looked out over our changed settlement. So much had happened in my absence, so much time lost. But the weight of the amulet reminded me of why I had made this sacrifice. "Tell me everything," I said to Eric and Leif. "I have much to learn about what has transpired. And then, we have work to do. The evil beneath the earth will not wait. And neither can we." As my people gathered around, eager to hear of my trials and to share their own stories, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Sadness for the time I had lost, pride in how our people had thrived in my absence, and a steely determination to use the power I had gained to protect them all. The great sacrifice had been made, but I knew in my heart that it was only the beginning. The summer sun beat down on our thriving settlement, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that ran down my spine as I gazed out over the fjord. Our clan had flourished in the months since my return from the mountain, the power of the artifact allowing us to tame this harsh land in ways we never thought possible. Crops grew in abundance, livestock thrived, and our people were stronger and healthier than ever before. But with prosperity came new challenges. Word of our success had spread, and I could feel the weight of jealous eyes upon us. Leif approached, his face etched with concern. "Bjorn, the scouts have returned. It's as we feared. The southern clans are gathering their forces." I nodded grimly, my hand unconsciously moving to the artifact that hung around my neck. "And what of our diplomatic efforts?" "Mixed results," Eric interjected, joining our conversation. "The Raven clan and the Bear clan have agreed to stand with us. But Ivar the Boneless remains opposed. He claims we've used dark sorcery to steal the land's bounty." I couldn't help but chuckle darkly at the irony. If only he knew the true price we've paid for this bounty. "What's our next move?" Leif asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Before I could answer, a commotion broke out near the center of our settlement. We rushed to investigate, finding a group of our warriors surrounding a stranger. A man wearing the colors of the Wolf clan, one of our more distant neighbors. "I bring word from the coast," the man gasped, clearly exhausted from a long journey. "A fleet unlike any we've ever seen approaches our shores. Hundreds of ships led by a ruthless king from the east." Murmurs of fear and disbelief rippled through the gathering crowd. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the noise. "What king is this? Speak plainly, man." The messenger's eyes met mine, filled with a mix of awe and terror. "They call him Harald Hardrada, the Hard Ruler. It's said he's conquered lands from Russ to Miklagard. Now he sets his sights on our shores, claiming all of Iceland as his by right of conquest." A heavy silence fell over the crowd as the implications sank in. This was no mere clan dispute or jealous neighbors. This was an invasion that threatened not just our settlement, but all who called this land home. I turned to Eric and Leif, my most trusted advisors. Gather the clan leaders. All of them, even Ivar. We face a threat that concerns us all. As our messengers rode out to summon the other clans, I retreated to my longhouse to contemplate our next move. The artifact thrummed with energy against my chest, a constant reminder of the power at my disposal, and the responsibility that came with it. Hours later, the great hall was filled with the leaders of every clan in the region. The air was thick with tension, as old rivals and new allies alike eyed each other warily. I stood at the head of the table, my gaze sweeping over the assembled leaders. You all know why you've been called here. A threat approaches that concerns us all. Harald Hardrada comes with a fleet that could overwhelm any one of us alone. Ivar the Boneless, a wiry man with sharp eyes, spoke up. And why should we believe you, Bjorn Ironside? How do we know this isn't some trick to bring us under your control? Murmurs of agreement came from some of the other leaders. I felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. Now was not the time for petty disputes. Because, Ivar, I said calmly, if I wanted to conquer you, I would have done so already. I touched the artifact at my throat, allowing its power to flare visibly for a moment. Gasps of surprise and fear rippled through the room. The gods have granted me power, yes, I continued, but not to rule over you. To protect this land, our land, from threats like the one we now face. Astrid stepped forward, her eyes glowing with the same otherworldly light I'd seen on the night of the ritual. Bjorn speaks the truth. I have seen visions of the fleet that approaches. If we do not stand united, all will fall before Harald's onslaught. Her words seemed to have an effect, even on the most skeptical of the leaders. One by one, they pledged their support. All except Ivar, who remained stubbornly silent. As the meeting concluded and the other leaders departed to muster their forces, I approached Ivar. Your strength could make the difference in the coming battle, I said quietly. Will you truly let old grudges doom us all? Ivar's eyes narrowed. I'll consider your words, Bjorn Ironside. But know this, if I fight alongside you, it will be for the good of my people, not out of any love for you or your God's given power. I nodded, accepting his terms. It wasn't the full alliance I'd hoped for, but it was a start. As the days passed and reports of Harald's approaching fleet grew more frequent, I knew we needed more than just the strength of our combined clans. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the stone arch that marked the entrance to the hidden valley. The mist swirled as I approached, and a figure materialized, the same being that had guided us on our first visit. You return, Bjorn Ironside. What brings you to our realm in this time of turmoil? I bowed my head in respect. Great One, a threat approaches that endangers not just my people, but all who dwell in this land. I come seeking the aid of the hidden people, as was promised when we made our pact. The being's form shimmered, its expression unreadable. Aid can be given, yes, but remember, all power comes with a price. Are you prepared to pay it? I thought of our flourishing settlement, of the peace and prosperity we'd built, of the future we hoped to secure. Whatever the cost, I will pay it. Our survival is worth any price. A sad smile played across the being's ethereal features. Very well. We will lend our power to your defense. But know this, the magic we will unleash is ancient and volatile. It may save your people, but it will change the very face of the land. And you, Bjorn Ironside, will be forever marked by its touch. I swallowed hard, but nodded my acceptance. I understand. Thank you for your aid. As I made my way back to our settlement, I could feel a change in the air. The very earth seemed to hum with anticipation, as if aware of the cataclysm to come. Days later, as the first ships of Harald's fleet appeared on the horizon, our combined forces stood ready on the shore. I could see the fear in the eyes of our warriors, but also the determination to defend their homes. I raised the artifact, feeling its power surge through me. People of Iceland, I called out, my voice carrying unnaturally far. Today we fight not just for our own clans, but for the very land itself. Stand firm and know that powers beyond our understanding stand with us." As if in response to my words, the ground began to tremble. In the distance, the great volcano that had been dormant for generations began to smoke and rumble. Panic began to spread through our ranks, but I held firm. "Stand fast," I commanded. "This is the aid we were promised." The sky darkened as ash began to fill the air. The sea churned and boiled, massive waves threatening to capsize the approaching ships. And then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, the volcano erupted. Rivers of lava poured down its slopes, somehow avoiding our forces while cutting off potential landing sites for Harold's army. Great cracks opened in the earth, swallowing up ships that had drawn too close to shore. In the midst of the chaos, I saw ethereal figures moving among our troops, the hidden people, lending their strength to our warriors and sowing confusion among our enemies. But even as our victory seemed assured, I felt a terrible pain lance through my body. I looked down to see the artifact glowing white-hot against my chest, its power searing into my very flesh. The price, I realized, was being exacted. As darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I saw Harold's flagship founder in the turbulent seas. Our people cheered, realizing the tide had turned decisively in our favor. With the last of my strength, I turned to Eric, who stood wide-eyed beside me. "The day is won," I gasped. "But the war is just beginning." Then the world went black, and I knew no more. The battle was over, but as the dust settled and the lava cooled, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. The very landscape had been reshaped by the cataclysmic eruption, and our people looked to an uncertain future. As for me, I lay in a deep slumber, the artifact now permanently fused to my chest, a constant reminder of the power we had unleashed and the responsibilities that came with it. The threat of Harold Hardrada had been repelled, but I knew in my heart that greater challenges still lay ahead. The sky burned crimson, choked with ash and smoke from the still rumbling volcano. I stood atop a hill overlooking the battlefield, the united forces of Iceland's clans arrayed before me. The artifact pulsed against my chest, its power a constant reminder of the price we'd paid for this moment. "Bjorn," Eric called, riding up to my side. "Harold's forces have begun to land. They're pushing through the lava fields to the east." I nodded grimly. "Then it's time. Signal the clans. We meet them head-on." As our horns sounded across the ash-strewn landscape, I raised my voice, infused with the artifact's power. "Warriors of Iceland, today we fight not just for our clans, but for the very land itself. Let Harold and his men feel the wrath of our people and our gods." A roar went up from our assembled forces, drowning out even the rumble of the volcano. As one, we surged forward, meeting Harold's invading army in a clash of steel and fury. The battle was like nothing I had ever experienced. Rivers of lava cut across the battlefield, forcing both sides to adapt to the ever-changing terrain. The air was thick with ash, turning day into a hellish twilight. In the midst of the chaos, I caught glimpses of our hidden allies. Ethereal figures darted between the combatants, their touch bringing confusion and fear to our enemies while bolstering the courage of our own warriors. I found myself in the thick of the fighting, the artifact's power flowing through me, making my strikes faster and stronger than ever before. But even as we pushed Harold's forces back, I could see the toll the battle was taking on our people. "Bjorn," Leif's voice carried over the din of battle. "Their center is breaking, but our left flank is in trouble." I turned to see a group of Harold's berserkers tearing through our lines. Without hesitation, I charged towards them, the artifact flaring with energy. As I engaged the first berserker, the world around me seemed to slow. I could see every twitch of his muscles, anticipate every strike. We exchanged a flurry of blows, my axe finally finding its mark in his unprotected neck. But even as he fell, I sensed a new presence on the battlefield. A figure in ornate armor, wielding a sword that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "Harold?" I breathed, recognizing the enemy king from the descriptions we'd heard. Our eyes met across the battlefield, and in that moment I knew this conflict would only end with one of us dead. I began to fight my way towards him, but the tide of battle kept pushing us apart. It was then that I noticed Harold was making his way towards the base of a massive glacier that loomed over the eastern edge of the battlefield. "He's trying to gain the high ground," Eric shouted, appearing at my side. "We can't let him establish a position up there." I nodded, my decision made. "Hold the line here. I'll deal with Harold myself." Before Eric could protest, I was off, using the artifact's power to leap over chasms of lava and bound up the steep incline of the glacier. Harold saw me coming, a grim smile spreading across his face. "So, you're the one they call Bjorn Ironside," he called out as I approached. "The sorcerer king who thinks he can defy me." I raised my axe in salute. "And you're Harold Hardrada, the would-be conqueror, who's about to learn the true price of invading our lands." Without another word, we charged at each other. The clash of our weapons echoed across the glacier, sparks flying with each impact. Harold was every bit the warrior his reputation claimed, his sword a blur of deadly precision. But I had the power of the artifact on my side, and the strength born of defending one's home. We traded blows, each seeking that one opening that would end the fight. As we fought, I became aware of a new sound underlying the clash of our weapons. A low, ominous cracking. The heat of the eruption and the fury of our battle were taking their toll on the glacier. "Your people are impressive, I'll grant you that," Harold panted, parrying one of my strikes. "But they will kneel to me in the end. All lands must submit to my rule." I pressed forward, forcing him back a step. "You understand nothing of our people, Harold. We are bound to this land and it to us. Your ambition will be your downfall." Just as I prepared for another assault, a tremendous crack split the air. The glacier beneath our feet began to shift and buckle. "What sorcery is this?" Harold bellowed, struggling to keep his footing. Before I could respond, the ice gave way entirely. We plummeted into darkness, the world above disappearing in a shower of ice and snow. The fall seemed to last an eternity. I lashed out blindly with the artifact's power, trying to slow our descent. Finally, with a bone-jarring impact, we crashed onto a hard surface. Groaning, I pushed myself to my feet, trying to make sense of our surroundings. We had fallen into a vast underground cavern, its walls glittering with strange, phosphorescent crystals that cast an eerie glow over everything. Harold was already up, his sword at the ready. But his attention wasn't on me. His eyes were fixed on something behind me, wide with a fear I never expected to see in such a hardened warrior. I turned slowly and felt my blood run cold at what I saw. Rising from the depths of an underground lake was a creature out of nightmare. It was massive, its body a writhing mass of tentacles and scales. But it was its eyes that truly chilled me to my core, ancient, intelligent, and filled with an unfathomable malevolence. "By all the gods," Harold whispered, his voice trembling. "What is that monstrosity?" The realization hit me like a physical blow. "The Devourer," I breathed. "The ancient evil the hidden people warned us about. It's real." As if in response to my words, the creature let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the cavern. I could feel its hunger, its desire to consume everything in its path. Harold, to his credit, rallied quickly. "Whatever it is, it dies today," he declared, raising his sword. I grabbed his arm, stopping him. "You fool. This is no mere beast to be slain with steel. This is an evil older than our people, older than this land itself." For a moment, Harold looked like he might strike me down where I stood. But then understanding dawned in his eyes. "You've faced this before, or something like it." I nodded grimly. Not directly, but I was warned. This is the true threat to our lands, Harold. Not you, not me, not any mortal ambition. The Devourer began to move towards us, its massive form sending waves crashing against the shore of the underground lake. I could feel the artifact pulsing against my chest, reacting to the creature's presence. "We need to get out of here," Harold said, his eyes darting around for an escape route. "Warn our people." But I knew, with a certainty that came from the artifact's power, that running was not an option. If we leave now, it will follow. It's awake, Harold, and it's hungry. Understanding passed between us in that moment. Whatever our differences, whatever brought us to this point, none of it mattered in the face of this primordial threat. Then we stand and fight, Harold declared, a hint of his old bravado returning. Together. I nodded, feeling the artifact's power begin to surge through me. Together, for our people, and for the land itself. As the devourer bore down upon us, I reached out with the artifact's power, feeling the energies of the earth responding to my call. Harold raised his glowing sword, its light pushing back the darkness. In that moment, as we prepared to face an evil beyond our comprehension, I realized that this was what all our struggles had been leading to. Every hardship, every sacrifice, had prepared us for this moment. The battle for Iceland's soul was about to begin, and the fate of not just our land, but perhaps the entire world hung in the balance. The devourer's roar echoed through the cavern once more, a challenge to all who would stand against it. Harold and I exchanged one final look, a lifetime of conflict set aside in the face of a greater threat. The icy water burned my lungs as I plummeted deeper into the cavern's depths, the enemy king tumbling beside me. Our battle, moments ago so fierce and personal, now seemed trivial in the face of our shared peril. As we sank, a faint glow emanated from below, growing brighter with each passing second. Suddenly we burst into an air pocket, gasping and sputtering. The king and I locked eyes, a silent agreement passing between us. Survival first, battle later. We swam to a rocky outcropping and hauled ourselves out of the frigid water. "By Odin's beard," the king muttered, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. I followed his gaze and felt my breath catch in my throat. Before us stretched a vast underground chamber illuminated by an eerie, pulsating light. Massive stone pillars carved with runes I'd never seen before, stretched from floor to ceiling. At the center of the chamber stood a colossal statue, easily 5 times the height of a man, depicting a monstrous creature with too many limbs and eyes to count. "What is this place?" I whispered, more to myself than to my former enemy. The king shook his head slowly. "I've heard tales, whispers of an ancient evil that slumbers beneath these lands, but I never believed." A low rumble shook the cavern, and fine dust rained down from above. The statue's eyes began to glow with an unholy light. "We need to get out of here," I said urgently. "We must warn our people." The king nodded grimly. "Agreed. This threat is greater than any quarrel between our clans." We searched frantically for an exit, the rumbling growing louder with each passing moment. Finally, we discovered a narrow passageway leading upward. As we climbed, the very rock seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. After what felt like hours of grueling ascent, we emerged onto the surface. The sight that greeted us was one of utter chaos. The sky had turned an angry red, and in the distance, we could see rivers of lava pouring from erupting volcanoes. The air was thick with ash and the screams of panicked people. "By the gods," the king breathed. "What have we awakened?" I turned to him, my voice grim. "We must gather all the clan leaders, even those who oppose us. This threat will consume us all if we don't stand united." He nodded solemnly. "I'll send my fastest riders to spread the word. Where shall we meet?" "The great hall in our settlement," I replied. "It's the largest structure in the area. We'll need all the space we can get." As the king departed to rally his forces, I raced back to my own settlement. The scenes of destruction I witnessed along the way filled me with dread. Farmsteads lay in ruins, crushed by massive boulders that seemed to have fallen from the sky. The earth itself was splitting open in places, releasing noxious fumes that choked the air. When I finally reached the great hall, I found it already bustling with activity. My advisor Bjorn rushed to meet me. "My lord," he exclaimed, "where have you been? We feared the worst when the earth began to shake." I clasped his shoulder firmly. "There's no time to explain everything now. We have a grave threat to face. I need you to send messengers to every clan on the island. Tell them to send their leaders here immediately. Our survival depends on it." Bjorn's eyes widened, but he nodded without question. It will be done. As the hall filled with clan leaders over the next few hours, the atmosphere grew tense. Old rivalries and grudges simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. When the enemy king arrived with his retinue, the room fell silent. I stood atop a table, raising my hands for attention. Leaders of Iceland, I know there is bad blood between many of us, but we face a threat that will destroy us all if we don't stand together. Murmurs of disbelief and skepticism rippled through the crowd. A burly chieftain named Hakon spoke up, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And why should we believe you? You who have used that cursed artifact to gain power over us all? Before I could respond, the enemy king stepped forward. Because I have seen it with my own eyes, he declared. There is an ancient evil awakening beneath our feet, one that will consume everything in its path. The room erupted into chaos, with some leaders shouting accusations of trickery, while others called for immediate action. I slammed my axe against my shield, the loud clang silencing the crowd. Enough, I roared. We don't have time for petty squabbles. Even now the land is being torn apart. You've all seen the signs, the eruptions, the earthquakes. The sky turned to blood. We must act now, or everything we've built here will be lost. An elderly woman, respected as a seer among her people, spoke up. What do you propose we do against such a threat? We are but mortals, and this evil sounds beyond our power to defeat. I held up the artifact, its surface glowing with an inner light. With this, we may have a chance. Its power has protected us before, and it may be our only hope now. The enemy king nodded in agreement. I've seen the power of that artifact. If anything can save us, it's that. Slowly, the mood in the room began to shift. Leaders who had been at each other's throats moments ago now spoke in hushed tones, strategizing and pooling their knowledge. As night fell, we had formed a plan. We would use the artifact in a grand ritual, focusing all our combined strength to seal away the ancient evil. It was a desperate gambit, but it was all we had. We set out at dawn, a united force marching towards the heart of the island where the evil's presence was strongest. The journey was treacherous, with the very land seeming to rise against us. Fissures opened beneath our feet, and burning rocks rained from the sky. Finally, we reached our destination, a massive crater that pulsed with malevolent energy. As we prepared for the ritual, I could feel the artifact growing hotter in my hands, almost as if it were alive and eager for what was to come. The clan leaders formed a circle around me, joining hands and beginning a low, rhythmic chant. I raised the artifact high, feeling its power course through me. For a moment, I thought we might succeed. But then everything went wrong. A massive tremor shook the ground, breaking the circle. The artifact's glow turned from a warm gold to a sickly green. I felt a searing pain in my arms as the power backfired, and I was thrown backward. As I struggled to my feet, I saw a horrifying sight. The crater was opening wider, and from its depths rose a colossal form, the very creature we had seen depicted in the underground chamber. Despair washed over me as I realized our efforts had only served to hasten the awakening of this ancient evil. The clan leaders looked to me, their eyes filled with fear and the unspoken question, what do we do now? It was then that an old memory stirred in my mind. Words spoken by the hidden people when I first acquired the artifact. A prophecy, almost forgotten in the rush of events that followed. When darkness rises from the depths and all hope seems lost, a chosen one shall stand between worlds. Only through the ultimate sacrifice can the land be saved. As the words echoed in my mind, I knew what had to be done. I turned to my trusted friend and advisor, Bjorn, my voice heavy with the weight of destiny. My friend, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder, I fear this may be our final stand. But know this, whatever happens, the future of our people now rests with you. Bjorn's eyes widened with understanding and sorrow. There must be another way, he pleaded. I shook my head, a sad smile on my face. The prophecy speaks of a chosen one. I believe now that it referred to me. Only through sacrifice can we hope to seal this evil away. As the enormous creature continued to rise from the crater, its roar shaking the very foundations of the earth, I turned to face it. The artifact glowed in my hands, responding to my newfound resolve. "Stand back," I shouted to the others. "Whatever happens, do not interfere. The fate of Iceland depends on this moment." With those final words, I stepped forward to face the ancient evil, ready to fulfill the prophecy and save our people, no matter the cost. The realization hit me like a blow from Mjolnir itself. The prophecy, the artifact, the ancient evil rising before us, it all led to this moment. I, the one who had led our people to this new land, must now be the one to save it through the ultimate sacrifice. I turned to Bjorn, my most trusted friend and advisor, who stood nearby with fear and confusion etched on his weathered face. The weight of what I must do pressed heavily upon me, but I forced strength into my voice as I spoke. "Bjorn, my old friend," I said, grasping his shoulder firmly. "The time has come for me to fulfill the prophecy. I must face this evil alone." Bjorn's eyes widened in disbelief. "Alone? But that's madness. We stand together as we always have." I shook my head solemnly. "Not this time. The prophecy speaks of a chosen one, and I now know it refers to me. The future of our people rests in your hands now." Tears welled in Bjorn's eyes as understanding dawned. "There must be another way," he pleaded. "There isn't," I replied, my voice softening. "Promise me you'll lead our people wisely. Build the future we dreamed of when we first set sail for this land." Bjorn straightened, squaring his shoulders as he fought back tears. I promise. May the gods watch over you, my friend." With a final nod to Bjorn, I turned to face the monstrous entity that continued to rise from the depths of the earth. Its form defied description, a writhing mass of tentacles, eyes, and gnashing teeth that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. The artifact in my hand pulsed with energy, growing warmer as if responding to my resolve. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Stand back," I shouted to the assembled clan leaders and warriors. "Whatever happens, do not interfere. The fate of Iceland depends on this moment." As I stepped forward, the ground beneath my feet began to shift and warp. The very air seemed to ripple and distort around me. With each step, I felt myself being pulled into a realm beyond our own, a place between worlds where the laws of reality held no sway. The monstrous entity roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the earth. As the last vestiges of our world faded away, I found myself in a nightmarish landscape. The sky above swirled with impossible colors, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Before me loomed the ancient evil in all its terrifying glory. Its voice when it spoke was not a sound, but a feeling, a crushing weight of malevolence that threatened to overwhelm my very being. "Foolish mortal," it boomed. "You dare to challenge me? I am older than time itself. I have slumbered beneath this land since before your kind learned to wield fire." I stood my ground, raising the artifact high. "I am no ordinary mortal," I declared, my voice surprisingly steady. "I am the chosen one, destined to end your threat to our world." The entity's laughter was like the grinding of massive stones. "Chosen one? There have been many who thought themselves chosen. They all fell before me, their bones now dust beneath the earth. Then I shall succeed where they failed," I countered, channeling my will into the artifact. It began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The battle that ensued defied description. In this realm between worlds, thought became reality. The ancient evil lashed out with tendrils of pure darkness, each strike threatening to unmake me entirely. I countered with blasts of energy from the artifact, each blow fueled by my determination to protect our people. As we clashed, the landscape around us twisted and changed. Mountains rose and crumbled in the blink of an eye. Oceans of fire gave way to plains of ice, only to be swallowed by abyssal chasms moments later. Through it all, I could feel the presence of those I had left behind: Bjorn, the clan leaders, all of Iceland. Their hopes and fears gave me strength, even as the battle took its toll. Time lost all meaning in this place. We might have fought for minutes or millennia. With each exchange, I could feel my mortal form being worn away, my very essence merging with the power of the artifact. Finally, in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I saw my opportunity. The ancient evil in its arrogance had overextended itself. I poured every ounce of my remaining strength into the artifact, focusing all of its power into a single blinding beam of light. The entity screamed, a sound of rage and disbelief that threatened to tear reality itself apart. Impossible. I cannot be defeated by a mere mortal. I am more than mortal now, I said, my voice echoing with power that surprised even me. I am the will of my people, the spirit of Iceland itself. With a final titanic effort, I drove the energy of the artifact deep into the heart of the ancient evil. There was a moment of absolute stillness, then an explosion of light and power that consumed everything. When awareness returned, I found myself changed. My mortal form was gone, replaced by something other. I could feel the essence of Iceland flowing through me. Every glacier, every volcano, every blade of grass and grain of sand. The ancient evil was not destroyed, for such a being could never truly die. But it was bound, sealed away in the deepest depths of the earth, wrapped in chains forged from my own sacrifice and the power of the artifact. As my new consciousness expanded, I became aware of the mortal realm once more. I saw Bjorn and the others, looking around in confusion as the unnatural phenomena caused by the ancient evil began to subside. Though they could not see or hear me in my new form, I spoke to them one last time. My friends, my people, the threat is contained, but not without cost. I have become one with the land, a guardian spirit to watch over Iceland for all eternity. Live well, build the future we dreamed of, and know that I will always be here, in every rock, tree, and stream. I felt a wave of understanding pass through them. Bjorn looked up at the sky, now clearing to reveal the stars above, and I saw a mix of sorrow and determination in his eyes. "We will make you proud," he whispered. As the years passed, I watched over the land and its people. I saw settlements grow into towns and towns into cities. I witnessed the triumphs and tragedies, the joys and sorrows of countless generations. Through it all, I remained vigilant, ever watchful for any sign that the ancient evil might stir in its prison. And on quiet nights, when the aurora danced in the sky and the wind whispered across the landscape, those attuned to the old ways could sometimes hear my voice, a reminder of the sacrifice made long ago and a promise of protection for as long as Iceland endured. In time, my story passed into legend. Few remembered the truth of the Viking chieftain who had become one with the land. But in every erupting volcano, every glacial stream, every gust of wind across the moors, I remained, the eternal guardian spirit of Iceland, born from sacrifice and undying love for the land and its people. The gentle lapping of waves against the shoreline had always been my lullaby, but on this night, it was the faint whisper of steel on wood that roused me from my slumber. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light of the dying embers in the hearth. Something was different. The air felt charged, as if Thor himself had just passed through our humble dwelling. I sat up, my rough woolen blanket falling away, and that's when I saw them. Runes, freshly carved into my bedpost, glowing with an otherworldly blue light. My heart raced as I traced my fingers over the ancient symbols, feeling their power pulse beneath my touch. Urus, Ansus, Raido, I whispered, recognizing the shapes. Strength, communication, journey. A sudden gust of wind swept through the room, causing the runes to flare brightly before fading back to ordinary scratches in the wood. I blinked, wondering if I had imagined it all, but the message was clear. The gods were calling me to embark on a journey. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in our wooden walls, I began to pack. My mind raced with questions and possibilities. Where would this journey take me? What did the gods have in store? Bjorn, what are you doing up so early? My mother's voice startled me from my thoughts. I turned to face her, seeing the concern etched on her weathered face. Mother, I've been called. The runes appeared to me in the night. I must go on a journey. Her eyes widened, a mix of fear and pride flashing across her features. I knew this day would come, she said softly, moving to a large chest in the corner of our one-room home. Your father spoke of it before he sailed to Valhalla. I watched, curiosity piqued as she rummaged through the chest, finally pulling out a cloth-wrapped object. With reverence, she placed it in my hands. This has been in our family for generations, she explained as I unwrapped it. It's said to hold great power, but only for those worthy of wielding it. In my hands lay a smooth, flat stone, about the size of my palm. Intricate runes covered its surface, some I recognized, others foreign to me. As I held it, I felt a warmth spread through my body as if the stone recognized me as its new keeper. Thank you, Mother, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I will carry it with honor. She pulled me into a tight embrace. May it protect you on your journey, my son. As the village began to stir with the morning's activities, I made my way to the elder's hut. Halfdan, our village's respected leader and keeper of ancient knowledge, was expecting me. Ah, young Bjorn, he greeted me, his milky eyes somehow finding mine despite his blindness. The winds of fate blow strong today. You've felt their call, haven't you? I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see. Yes, Elder. The runes appeared to me in the night. They speak of a journey. Halfdan's wrinkled face broke into a toothless grin. Good, good. It is as the gods have whispered to me. Sit, boy. There's much to discuss. I settled onto a wooden stool as Halfdan hobbled around his hut, gathering various items. Finally, he sat across from me, his unseeing gaze intense. Bjorn, you've always had a gift with words. The skalds have taught you well. But now the gods have chosen you for a greater purpose. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Our people's stories are fading, Bjorn. The old ways are being forgotten. You must go forth and collect these tales before they're lost forever. My mind reeled at the magnitude of this task. But Elder, how can I... Halfdan raised a gnarled hand, silencing me. You have the gift, boy, and now you have the tools. He gestured to the runestone I still clutched in my hand. This journey will not be easy. You'll face trials that will test your wit, your courage, and your faith. But remember, in every story you collect there lies a power older than the mountains themselves. He pressed a leather-bound book and a charcoal pencil into my hands. Record everything, Bjorn. Every tale, every song, every whisper of our gods. For in these stories lies the very soul of our people. As I left Halfdan's hut, my head swimming with the weight of my newfound purpose, I found myself at the docks. A longship was preparing to set sail, its dragon-headed prow pointing towards the vast unknown sea. The captain, a burly man with a fiery red beard, eyed me suspiciously. Where to, boy? This ain't no pleasure cruise. I stood tall, feeling the runestone pulse warmly in my pocket. I seek passage to distant shores. I am Bjorn, a skald on a sacred mission for our people. The captain's eyebrows shot up and then he let out a booming laugh. A sacred mission, eh? Well, if the gods have sent you, who am I to argue? Welcome aboard, skald. Let's see if your stories are worth your weight in cargo. As I stepped onto the ship, I cast one last glance at my village, at the only home I'd ever known. My mother stood on the shore, a solitary figure waving farewell. I raised my hand in return, my throat tight with emotion. The ship cast off, its sail catching the wind. As we pulled away from the shore, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was it. The start of my great journey. But the gods, it seemed, had one more test in store. As we cleared the fjord and entered the open sea, the sky darkened ominously. Wind whipped at the sail, and waves grew treacherous. The captain barked orders as his crew scrambled to secure rigging and cargo. Odin's beard, he roared over the howling wind. This storm came from nowhere. I clung to the side of the ship, my knuckles white as mountainous waves threatened to capsize us. Rain lashed at my face, and thunder boomed overhead. In that moment I felt small, insignificant in the face of nature's fury. "Tell us a story, Skald," one of the crew shouted. "Calm the gods with your words." Swallowing my fear, I raised my voice against the storm. I spoke of Thor's mighty battles, of his protection over sailors and travelers. As I wove the tale, I felt the runestone grow hot in my pocket. Suddenly, a massive wave rose before us, threatening to swallow the ship whole. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact, but it never came. Instead, I felt a warm presence beside me. My eyes snapped open to see a figure wreathed in light, hand outstretched, holding back the wave. In a blink, both the figure and the wave were gone. The storm calmed as quickly as it had arisen, leaving us all in stunned silence. As the clouds parted and sunlight once again bathed the ship, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed something beyond mortal understanding. My journey, it seemed, had truly begun. The captain approached me, his face a mixture of awe and suspicion. "I've sailed these waters for 30 winters, boy, and I've never seen anything like that. Who are you, really?" I met his gaze steadily, feeling the weight of my purpose settle on my shoulders. "I am Bjorn, a skald on a mission from the gods themselves. And this is only the beginning." The longship's keel scraped against the pebbly shore, announcing our arrival in this strange new land. As I disembarked, the air felt different, heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't quite name. The trees loomed before me, ancient sentinels standing guard over secrets untold. "Well, Skald," the captain's gruff voice called out, "this is where we part ways. May the gods watch over you on your journey." I turned to face him, gratitude welling in my chest. "Thank you, Captain. Your bravery in the face of that storm won't be forgotten." He waved off my praise with a calloused hand. "Just don't get yourself killed out there. The world needs more storytellers, not fewer." With a final nod, I shouldered my pack and set off towards the tree line. As I entered the forest, the sounds of the shore faded, replaced by an eerie whisper that seemed to come from the trees themselves. "Welcome, Seeker," the wind seemed to say, rustling through leaves that shimmered with an otherworldly light. I pressed on, my hand instinctively clutching the runestone in my pocket. Its familiar warmth gave me courage as I ventured deeper into the unknown. Hours passed and the forest grew denser. The whispers intensified, sometimes in a language I recognized, other times in tongues so ancient they predated words themselves. I was so entranced by the symphony of secrets that I almost missed the snapping twig behind me. Almost. I spun around, coming face to face with a group of rugged men, their weapons drawn and cruel smiles playing on their lips. "Well, well," the largest of them sneered. "What do we have here? A lost little lamb far from home?" I straightened my back, meeting his gaze steadily. "I am Bjorn, a skald on a sacred mission. I carry nothing of value to you." The bandits laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the trees. "A skald, eh?" their leader mocked. "Let's see if your silver tongue can save you now." My mind raced. I needed to find a way out of this, and fast. Then, an idea struck me. "Before you decide my fate," I said, injecting confidence into my voice, "perhaps you'd like to hear a story? One that could change your fortunes forever." The leader's eyes narrowed, but curiosity flickered in their depths. "Go on," he grunted. I took a deep breath, and began to weave a tale, drawing upon the whispers I'd heard in the forest. I spoke of a hidden treasure, guarded by ancient magic that could only be claimed by those pure of heart. As I spun my story, I watched the bandits' expressions change. Greed replaced hostility, and they leaned in, captivated. "This treasure," the leader breathed. "Where is it?" I smiled inwardly. I had them. The forest itself guards this secret. Only those who listen closely can hear its guidance. But beware, the unworthy will be led astray, lost forever in these woods. The bandits exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, the leader sheathed his weapon. "You've given us much to think about, Skald. We'll spare you this time. But if we find out you've lied, may Odin himself strike me down if I've spoken falsely," I replied solemnly. They melted back into the forest, leaving me alone once more. I let out a shaky breath, scarcely believing my ruse had worked. As my heartbeat slowed, I became aware of a new whisper in the air. It was clearer than the others, beckoning me deeper into the forest. With no better option, I followed its call. The whisper led me to a hidden grove, where ancient stones stood in a perfect circle. In the center sat an old woman, her silver hair gleaming in the dappled sunlight. "Welcome, Bjorn," she said, her voice like the rustling of autumn leaves. "I've been expecting you." I approached cautiously. "You know me?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom. "The trees have spoken of your coming. Sit, child. You seek stories, do you not?" I sat across from her, pulling out my leather-bound book and charcoal. "Yes, I do. But how did you know?" "The wind carries more than just seeds, young Skald. It brings tidings from across the 9 worlds. Now listen closely, for the tale I'm about to share is older than Yggdrasil itself." As the wise woman began her story, the grove seemed to come alive around us. The trees leaned in, their leaves shimmering with anticipation. Even the stones seemed to pulse with an inner light. She spoke of the time before time, when the world was nothing but mist and ice. She told of the birth of Ymir, the first giant, and how Odin and his brothers slew him to create the world from his body. Her words painted vivid pictures in my mind of the creation of Midgard, the realm of humans and the 8 other worlds connected by the great world tree. As I frantically scribbled down her words, I felt the runestone in my pocket grow warm. Glancing down, I saw a faint glow emanating from it, pulsing in rhythm with the cadence of the woman's voice. When she finished her tale, a profound silence fell over the grove. I looked up from my writing to find her studying me intently. "You felt it, didn't you?" she asked. "The power in the words?" I nodded, pulling out the runestone. Its glow had faded, but I could still feel the energy thrumming within it. "What's happening?" The wise woman's eyes sparkled. "Your runestone is no ordinary rock, Bjorn. It's a vessel designed to collect and store the power of our stories. With each tale you gather, it will grow stronger." My mind reeled with the implications. But why? What is this power for? She shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "That I cannot tell you. Your journey has only just begun, and some truths must be discovered, not given. But know this, the fate of our people, perhaps of all the 9 worlds, rests upon your quest." As if on cue, the wind picked up, rustling through the leaves with renewed urgency. The wise woman cocked her head, as if listening. "You must go," she said suddenly. "The forest warns of danger approaching. Take the path to the east. It will lead you to your next challenge." I scrambled to my feet, gathering my belongings. "But I have so many more questions." "And you will find answers in time," she assured me. "Trust in the stories, Bjorn. They will guide you true." With one last look at the mysterious woman, I dashed out of the grove, following the eastern path. As I ran, I could hear shouts behind me. The bandits had returned, no doubt furious at being tricked. But as I fled deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close ranks behind me, obscuring my trail. The whispers surrounded me once more, but now I understood them for what they were. The accumulated wisdom of ages, guiding me on my quest. My hand closed around the runestone in my pocket, feeling its newfound warmth. I didn't fully understand the power I now carried, but I knew one thing for certain. My journey was far from over. With each story I collected, I was one step closer to unraveling the mystery of the Edda, and perhaps to shaping the very fate of the 9 worlds. The path ahead was shrouded in mist, but I pressed on, guided by the whispers of Yggdrasil and the growing power of the stories I carried. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, armed with the mightiest weapon of all. The mountain loomed before me, its snow-capped peak piercing the clouds like a spear thrust into the heavens. I had been traveling for days, following the whispers of the wind and the pulsing warmth of my runestone. As I approached the narrow pass that wound its way up the mountainside, a sense of foreboding settled over me like a heavy cloak. The path grew steeper, and the air thinned. My legs burned with exertion, but I pressed on, driven by an inexplicable urgency. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. At first, I thought it was an avalanche, but then I heard it, a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to come from the mountain itself. "Who dares to trespass on my domain?" I froze in my tracks as a massive figure emerged from behind a boulder, so large it had seemed part of the mountain itself. The giant towered over me, his skin the color of granite, his eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. Swallowing my fear, I straightened my back and spoke as clearly as I could. "I am Bjorn, a skald on a sacred quest. I seek passage through these mountains." The giant's laughter boomed through the pass, sending loose rocks tumbling down the slope. "A sacred quest, you say? Many have claimed such, little mortal, and their bones now litter my mountain." He leaned down, his face mere feet from mine, and I could smell the ancient ice on his breath. "But I am not without mercy. Solve my riddle, and you may pass. Fail, and your life is forfeit." I nodded, my hand instinctively grasping the runestone in my pocket. Its warmth gave me courage. "I accept your challenge, Great One. What is your riddle?" The giant's eyes narrowed, and he spoke in a voice that echoed through the mountains. "I am not alive, but I grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, but water kills me. What am I?" My mind raced as I contemplated the riddle. Not alive, but grows. Needs air. Water kills it. The answer danced at the edge of my consciousness, tantalizing and just out of reach. The giant began to count down. "You have until the sun touches the peak of my mountain to answer, little skald. Your time grows short." I closed my eyes, trying to recall any fragment of a story that might help. Suddenly a memory surfaced, a tale told by my grandmother on cold winter nights. It spoke of the fire giants and their eternal battle with the frost giants. Fire. The answer had to be fire. But even as the realization struck me, doubt crept in. It seemed too simple, too obvious for such a fearsome guardian. The sun inched closer to the mountaintop, and desperation clawed at my throat. Then, unbidden, the runestone in my pocket grew warm. In my mind's eye, I saw flashes of the stories I had collected, the wise woman's tale of creation, the whispers of the ancient forest. And there, in a fragment of a half-remembered myth, I found my answer. Just as the sun's edge touched the peak, I spoke. "The answer to your riddle is not fire, as one might first think, but something far more primal." I took a deep breath. "The answer is coal." The giant's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "Explain." "Coal is not alive, but it grows over millennia from the remains of ancient forests. It needs air to burn, but water extinguishes it. And like the riddle itself, it holds more depth than first appears." For a long moment silence reigned. Then, to my amazement, the giant began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and built to a thunderous roar that shook snow from the mountaintops. "Well reasoned, little skald," he boomed. "You've earned your passage and perhaps a bit more." The giant settled himself on a boulder, which groaned under his weight. "It has been an age since I've had the pleasure of wit. Come, sit. I have a story for you if you'd hear it." Hardly daring to believe my luck, I sat on a smaller rock across from him and pulled out my book and charcoal. "I would be honored to hear your tale." The giant's eyes grew distant, gazing at something beyond the physical realm. "Long ago, I was not as you see me now. I was a man, a great warrior beloved by my people, but I grew arrogant, boasting that my strength rivaled that of the gods themselves." He sighed, a gust of wind that ruffled my hair. "Odin heard my boast and came to challenge me. I fought with all my might, but how can a mortal hope to best the All-Father? As punishment for my hubris, he transformed me into this, a being of living stone forever bound to this mountain." As I frantically scribbled down his words, I felt the now familiar warmth of the runestone pulsing in time with the giant's tale. When he finished, I looked up to find him studying me intently. "Your stone," he rumbled. "It glows with power. You carry great magic, little skald." I nodded, pulling out the runestone. Its surface shimmered with an inner light. "It grows stronger with each story I collect, but I don't fully understand its purpose." The giant nodded sagely. "Such is the way of the most powerful magics. Their true nature reveals itself only in time." He fixed me with his obsidian gaze. "But take care, Bjorn the Skald. Great power attracts great danger." As if to emphasize his point, a cold wind howled through the pass, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The giant turned his head, as if listening to a voice I couldn't hear. "You must go," he said urgently. "Dark forces stir, drawn by the power you carry. The path ahead is treacherous, but you must not falter." I scrambled to my feet, gathering my belongings. But as I turned to leave, a thought struck me. "Wait, your curse, is there no way to break it?" The giant's expression softened, a sad smile cracking his stony features. "Ah, little one, your heart does you credit. But some fates are not so easily undone." Determination welled up inside me. "I'll find a way," I promised. "Somewhere in the stories I'm collecting, there must be an answer." He chuckled, the sound like boulders rolling down a hillside. "Perhaps. But do not let my fate distract you from your quest. The 9 worlds may depend on your success." With a final nod of gratitude, I set off down the mountain path. As I descended, the giant's last words echoed in my mind, mingling with the pulse of power from my runestone. The realization hit me like a bolt from Thor's hammer. These stories I was collecting, they were more than just tales. They were keys to an ancient, powerful magic, and somehow my quest to preserve them was tied to the very fate of the 9 worlds. The path ahead was shrouded in mist, both literally and figuratively. But as I clutched my book of stories and felt the warm pulse of the runestone, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them armed with the most powerful magic of all, the wisdom of ages, captured in the stories of our people. With renewed purpose, I strode forward into the unknown, ready to uncover the next piece of this cosmic puzzle. The wind whispered secrets in my ear, and the runestone hummed with potential. The forest had grown dense and dark, the ancient trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. I had been traveling for days since my encounter with the giant, my mind still reeling from the weight of the knowledge I'd gained. The runestone in my pocket pulsed with a steady warmth, as if urging me forward. Suddenly, a flash of light burst through the canopy, followed by the sound of something large crashing through the branches. I ducked instinctively as a figure plummeted from the sky, landing with a sickening thud mere feet from where I stood. As the dust settled, I approached cautiously. There, lying in a small crater, was a sight I never thought I'd see with my mortal eyes: a Valkyrie. Her armor was dented and scorched, one of her majestic wings bent at an unnatural angle. Despite her injuries, she radiated an otherworldly beauty that took my breath away. Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. "You," she gasped, her voice like distant thunder. "Skald, help me." I knelt beside her, my hands hovering uncertainly over her battered form. I'm not sure how. I'm no healer. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Your runestone. It has power. Use it. Swallowing hard, I pulled out the stone. It glowed brightly in the gloom of the forest, seeming to respond to the Valkyrie's presence. I don't know how, I admitted. Focus, she hissed through gritted teeth. Will it to heal, quickly, before they find me. Before who finds you? I asked, even as I closed my eyes and concentrated on the stone's warmth. But before she could answer, a sinister laugh echoed through the trees. Too late, little Valkyrie. We've found you. Dark shapes emerged from the shadows, lithe, graceful figures with pointed ears and eyes that glowed with malevolent hunger. Dark elves. Step aside, mortal, one of them sneered. This doesn't concern you. I stood, placing myself between the elves and the wounded Valkyrie. I cannot do that. She's under my protection. The elves laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Protection? You? What power does a mere human have against us? As they advanced, I felt a surge of energy from the runestone. Without thinking, I held it aloft, and words I didn't know I knew poured from my lips in a language older than time itself. A blinding light erupted from the stone, forcing the dark elves back. They hissed and snarled, shielding their eyes. This isn't over, their leader spat as they retreated into the shadows. We'll be back, and next time, your little trinket won't save you. As the light faded, I turned back to the Valkyrie, stunned by what had just transpired. To my amazement, her wounds were healing before my eyes, the dents in her armor smoothing out, her wing straightening. She sat up, regarding me with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. You're more than you appear, Skald. What's your name? Bjorn, I replied, still dazed. I'm on a quest to collect the stories of our people, but I didn't know I could do that. The Valkyrie nodded solemnly. The power of stories is greater than most realize. You're tapping into something ancient and potent, Bjorn. But such power comes with a price. She stood, stretching her newly healed wings. The sight was awe-inspiring. You've saved my life, and for that, I owe you a debt. I'll repay it with a story from Valhalla itself. But first we should move. Those dark elves will return with reinforcements. We made our way deeper into the forest, finally settling in a small clearing beside a babbling brook. As night fell, the Valkyrie, who introduced herself as Hildur, began her tale. In the great hall of Valhalla, she began, her voice taking on a melodic quality, there sits a warrior, unlike any other. His name is Helgi, and he was once a mortal king. But his bravery in battle and his unwavering honor caught the eye of Odin himself. As Hildur spoke, the clearing seemed to fade away. I could almost see the gleaming halls of Valhalla, hear the laughter and clash of weapons as Einherjar prepared for Ragnarok. Helgi's greatest battle, Hildur continued, was not fought with sword and shield, but with words and wit. For you see, even in Valhalla, there are politics and rivalries. A group of Einherjar, jealous of Helgi's favor with Odin, plotted to discredit him. She went on to describe an intricate tale of intrigue and honor, of how Helgi used his wisdom and eloquence to not only defeat his rivals, but to unite the warriors of Valhalla as never before. As she spoke, I furiously scribbled in my book, the runestone glowing brightly beside me. When Hildur finished her tale, a profound silence fell over the clearing. That's incredible, I breathed. Thank you for sharing it with me. Hildur nodded, but her expression was grave. You're welcome, Bjorn. But heed my warning. The stories you're collecting, they're not mere tales. They're keys to great power, as you've already begun to discover. And power, no matter how noble its purpose, always attracts those who would misuse it. I thought back to the dark elves, to the giant's words of caution. What should I do? Continue your quest, Hildur said firmly. These stories must be preserved, but be cautious. Trust your instincts and the guidance of your runestone. She plucked a feather from her wing, holding it out to me. Take this. In times of great need, it will guide you. As I took the feather, it shimmered with an otherworldly light. Thank you, Hildur, for everything. She smiled, a sight both beautiful and terrifying. May the All-Father watch over you, Bjorn the Skald. Our paths will cross again, I'm certain. With a powerful beat of her wings, Hildur took to the sky, quickly disappearing among the stars. I was left alone in the clearing, clutching a glowing feather and a book full of impossible stories. As I settled down to sleep, my mind raced with all I had learned. The runestone's power, the dark elves' attack, Hildur's warning. It was all connected to my quest, though I couldn't yet see how. One thing was clear. My journey to collect the stories of my people had become something far greater and more dangerous than I could have imagined. As I drifted off to sleep, I clutched the runestone and the Valkyrie's feather close, wondering what new wonders and perils the dawn would bring. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the weight of ancient secrets and the promise of adventures yet to come. The bustling market of Hedeby was a cacophony of sounds and smells, a stark contrast to the quiet forests and mountains I'd traversed. I wandered through the stalls, my ears pricked for any whisper of lore or legend that might aid my quest. As I examined a stall selling intricate runestones, I overheard two men speaking in hushed tones. Hidden hall, they say, where the mead of poetry flows like water. My heart skipped a beat. The mead of poetry, the legendary drink that bestowed the gift of poetry and wisdom upon those who tasted it. If such a thing truly existed, it could be invaluable to my mission. I sidled closer, pretending to examine a carved wooden figure. Nonsense, the other man scoffed. That's just a myth. No, it's true, the first insisted. My cousin's friend swears he saw it, a great hall hidden in the cliffs north of here. They're holding a feast tonight, but only the most elite are invited. As the men moved on, my mind raced with possibilities. The mead of poetry could be the key to unlocking the full potential of the stories I'd collected. But how to get into this hidden hall? An idea struck me as I passed a group of servants rushing to and fro, preparing for the night's festivities. With a bit of luck and cunning, I might just have a chance. Hours later, I found myself approaching a towering cliff face, dressed in borrowed servant's garb. My heart pounded as I searched for any sign of an entrance. Just as I was about to give up, a section of rock shimmered and vanished, revealing a grand doorway. I slipped inside, joining the throng of servants bustling about. The hall was magnificent, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting great battles and legendary heroes. At the center stood a massive table, laden with food and drink for the impending feast. As I helped arrange platters and fill goblets, I kept my eyes and ears open for any sign of the mead. Finally, I overheard a conversation between two richly dressed guests. Kept in the back chamber, guarded by Fafnir himself. The dragon? I thought he was slain by Sigurd. Hush! Not so loud. It's not the same Fafnir, but one of his kin. A shapeshifter, they say. My pulse quickened. A shape-shifting dragon guarding the mead. This would be no easy task. As the feast began and the hall filled with raucous laughter and boastful tales, I slipped away towards the back of the hall. There, hidden behind a heavy curtain, I found a small door. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open and entered a dimly lit chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a golden goblet filled with a shimmering liquid. Well, well, a silky voice purred. What have we here? From the shadows emerged a figure. At first glance, a stunningly beautiful woman. But as she moved, her form seemed to ripple and shift, sometimes scales glinting in the low light, sometimes feathers. I'm just here to clean, I stammered, bowing low. The dragon woman laughed, a sound like clinking gold. Oh, I think not, little Skald. I can smell the stories on you. She circled me, her form constantly shifting. You seek the mead, don't you? I straightened, meeting her ever-changing gaze. I do. I'm on a quest to collect and preserve the stories of our people. The mead could help me understand them more deeply. A noble goal, she mused. But why should I let you taste it? Many have tried to steal the mead. All have failed. An idea struck me. What if we made a trade? A story for a sip? Her eyes gleamed with interest. Go on. Drawing upon the power of my runestone, I began to weave a tale, incorporating elements from all the stories I'd collected. I spoke of creation and destruction, of gods and giants, of heroes and monsters. As I spoke, the chamber seemed to come alive, shadows dancing on the walls to illustrate my words. When I finished, the dragon woman was silent for a long moment. Then, to my amazement, she began to laugh. Oh, bravo, little skald. It's been an age since I've heard a tale so well crafted. She gestured to the goblet. You've earned your sip, but be warned, the mead's effects can be overwhelming. With trembling hands, I lifted the goblet to my lips and took a small sip. The effect was instantaneous. It felt as if my mind had exploded into a universe of its own, filled with swirling words and images. Knowledge flooded my consciousness. Secrets of poetry, hidden meanings in ancient tales, the very rhythm of creation itself. When the rush subsided, I found myself on my knees, gasping. The dragon woman watched me with amusement. Quite a ride, isn't it? She chuckled. Now, you'd best be off. Your little performance has drawn some unwelcome attention. As if on cue, shouts erupted from the main hall. I scrambled to my feet, my mind still reeling from the mead's effects. Thank you, I said hastily, already backing towards the door. She winked, her form shimmering into that of a massive dragon. Run along now, little skald, and do try not to get caught. I'd hate to see such a promising storyteller come to an untimely end. I dashed out of the chamber and through the main hall, which had erupted into chaos. As I burst out into the cool night air, I heard pursuit behind me. Stop him. He's stolen the mead. I ran faster than I ever had before, my feet barely touching the ground. As I fled, I became aware of a strange sensation. The chirping of birds overhead seemed to form words, carrying messages on the wind. Danger behind! Fly, storyteller, fly! The mead had given me the ability to understand the language of birds, but there was no time to marvel at this new gift. I could hear my pursuers gaining ground. Suddenly I remembered the Valkyrie's feather. I pulled it out, and it glowed brightly in the darkness. Guide me, I whispered desperately. The feather tugged in my hand, pulling me off the main path and into a dense thicket. I followed its guidance, ducking under branches and leaping over roots. Behind me, I heard my pursuers curse as they lost my trail. As dawn broke, I finally slowed, certain I had lost them. Collapsing against a tree, I tried to catch my breath and make sense of all that had happened. The mead of poetry had expanded my mind in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. But it had also made me a target. Who were these mysterious agents seeking to stop my quest? And how were they connected to the dark elves who had attacked the Valkyrie? As a chorus of birdsong erupted around me, carrying snippets of news and gossip from across the land, I realized my journey had taken yet another unexpected turn. The stories I was collecting were more powerful than I had ever imagined, and it seemed the fate of the 9 worlds might truly hang in the balance. With a deep breath, I stood, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path before me was uncertain, but armed with the power of stories, the guidance of my runestone, and now the wisdom granted by the mead of poetry, I felt prepared to meet my destiny head-on. The birds called out encouragement as I set off once more, their voices a reminder of the magical world I was only beginning to understand. The salty breeze ruffled my hair as I stood at the prow of the small fishing boat I'd managed to hire. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. But my attention was fixed on the flock of seabirds circling overhead, their cries now as clear to me as any human language thanks to the mead of poetry. This way, Skald. The lost city sleeps beneath the waves just beyond the mist. I relayed the bird's directions to the skeptical fisherman steering the boat. He shook his head, muttering, "Madness, following the words of birds. But your coin spends as well as any sane man's." As we pushed through a bank of dense fog, the bird's excitement grew palpable. Suddenly, the mist parted, revealing a stretch of eerily calm water. The surface shimmered with an unnatural light, and I could almost hear whispers emanating from the depths. "We're here," I breathed, my hand instinctively clutching the runestone in my pocket. Its warmth pulsed in rhythm with the strange light below. The fisherman's eyes widened. "By Odin's eye, what sorcery is this?" Before I could respond, the water before us began to churn. A massive tentacle glowing with bioluminescent patterns rose from the depths. The fisherman cried out in terror, but I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was no attack. It was an invitation. "Thank you for bringing me this far," I told the fisherman, pressing extra coins into his trembling hand. "Return to shore. I'll find my own way back." Without waiting for a response, I dove into the water. As I submerged, I felt the magic of my runestone envelop me, creating a bubble of air around my head and imbuing me with the ability to move effortlessly through the water. I followed the glowing tentacle down, into the abyssal darkness. Just as I thought my lungs would burst, despite the magical air bubble, I broke through into an enormous cavern. Before me lay a sight I'd never imagined possible. An entire city, preserved in a massive air bubble beneath the sea. Spires of coral and pearl reached toward a ceiling that shimmered like the surface of the water. Streets paved with mother-of-pearl wound between buildings that seemed to be carved from giant seashells. And everywhere, people, pale-skinned, with hair in shades of sea foam and kelp, going about their daily lives as if living underwater was the most natural thing in the world. As I stepped onto the street, dripping but somehow not wet, all activity ceased. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at me in wonder and fear. An elderly man, his long beard the color of sea foam, approached me cautiously. "Who are you, surface dweller? How have you come to our realm?" I bowed respectfully. "I am Bjorn, a skald on a sacred quest to collect the stories of all peoples. I was guided here by the birds and the creatures of the deep." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The old man's eyes widened. "A skald? It has been an age since we've heard tales from the surface world. I am Aegir, elder of this city. Welcome to Nastrund, the shore of corpses." "A grim name for such a beautiful place," I observed. Aegir's face darkened. "Aye, and a fitting one. For we are trapped here, neither living nor dead, cursed to exist in this twilight realm for eternity." Over the next hours, as I was led through the winding streets of Nastrund, Aegir and the other inhabitants shared their tale. They had once been a thriving coastal city, renowned for their skill in shipbuilding and navigation. But their pride grew too great, and they boasted that they could sail the very ship that would carry the gods at Ragnarok. "Odin himself came to challenge our claim," Aegir said, his voice heavy with regret. "When we could not produce such a ship, he cursed us. Our city was sunk beneath the waves, preserved in this bubble as a reminder of the folly of hubris. We cannot die, but neither can we truly live. We are forever cut off from Valhalla and the glories of the surface world." As he spoke, I scribbled furiously in my book, the runestone glowing brightly at my side. The stories of Nastrund were unlike any I'd encountered. Tales of undersea adventures, of battles with monstrous creatures from the deep, of love affairs between humans and merfolk. But underlying every story was a profound sadness, a longing for the world above. When Aegir finished, a heavy silence fell over the gathered crowd. I looked up from my writing, my heart aching for these trapped people. "Your tales are extraordinary," I said. "They deserve to be heard by the world above. But more than that, you deserve to be free of this curse." Aegir shook his head sadly. "Many have promised to break our curse, young skald. All have failed." I stood, feeling the power of the runestone and the mead of poetry coursing through me. "I swear to you, by Odin's wisdom and Thor's might, that I will find a way to break this curse. But in return, I ask for your permission to share your stories with the world. For in the power of tales, we may find the key to your salvation. A ripple of hope seemed to pass through the crowd. Aegir stroked his beard thoughtfully. It has been so long since we've had reason to hope. Very well, Bjorn the Skald. Go forth with our blessings and our stories. But know this, if you break your oath, the consequences will be dire. As if in response to his words, a low rumble shook the cavern. Through the shimmering ceiling, I saw the shadowy form of an enormous kraken circling above. Our guardian will follow you to the surface, Aegir explained. It will ensure you keep your promise, one way or another. With a final farewell to the people of Nastrund, I made my way back to the water's edge. As I prepared to swim back to the surface, a young girl with hair the color of coral approached me. "Please don't forget us," she said, pressing a pearl into my hand. "We've been alone for so long." I knelt down to meet her eyes. "I won't forget. I promise." As I broke through the surface, gasping in the salty air, I saw the fishing boat waiting at a distance, the fisherman's face a mask of terror as he watched the kraken's tentacles roil the water around me. But my mind was already racing, piecing together fragments of stories and myths, searching for the key to breaking the curse of Nastrund. The weight of my promise settled on my shoulders like a physical thing. But as I clutched my book of stories and felt the warm pulse of the runestone, I knew I had been entrusted with something precious. The hopes and dreams of an entire forgotten people. The kraken's enormous eye breached the surface regarding me with ancient intelligence. I nodded solemnly, reaffirming my oath. As I swam towards the boat, the seabirds circled overhead, their cries now tinged with both warning and encouragement. "A great task lies ahead, Skald. But in the weaving of tales, you may yet unravel the threads of fate." With the stories of Nastrund safely recorded, and the kraken shadowing my journey, I set my sights on the horizon. The village of Eldvik came into view as I crested a hill, the kraken's presence in the nearby fjord a constant reminder of my oath. But something was amiss. Instead of the usual sounds of daily life, I heard wailing and shouting. People ran through the streets, some gathering possessions, others simply screaming at the sky. As I entered the village, an old man grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with fear. "Run, stranger. The end is upon us. Ragnarok has begun." I gently removed his hand. "Calm yourself, good sir. What makes you think Ragnarok is here?" He pointed a trembling finger at the sky. "Look, the sun and moon, devoured by the great wolves Skjöll and Hati. The world tree Yggdrasil shudders. The Midgard serpent rises from the sea." I followed his gaze but saw only normal celestial bodies in calm waters. Yet the man's terror was real, as was that of the entire village. Something strange was definitely afoot. Making my way to the village center, I found a crowd gathered around a small figure. As I drew closer, I saw it was a young girl, no more than 8 summers old. But when she spoke, the voice that emerged was ancient and resonant, filled with the weight of eons. "The bonds are breaking," she intoned, her eyes rolled back in her head. "Fenrir howls, Jörmungandr thrashes. The fire giants of Muspelheim march, led by Surtur with his flaming sword. The Bifrost bridge cracks beneath their feet. Heimdallr raises the Gjallarhorn to his lips, ready to sound the warning. The Einherjar in Valhalla don their armor, preparing for the final battle." The villagers wailed anew at her words. I pushed through the crowd, kneeling before the girl. "Child, what is your name?" For a moment her eyes cleared, and she spoke in her normal voice. "I'm Astrid." Then the otherworldly tone returned. "But I speak with the voice of Volva, the ancient seer." I nodded, understanding dawning. "Volva, great seer, why do you share these visions now?" The girl's, or rather Volva's, gaze seemed to pierce right through me. "Because the time is nigh, Skald. The tapestry of fate unravels. The stories you've gathered hold the power to mend it or tear it asunder completely. Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I forced myself to focus on the panicking villagers. I stood, raising my voice to be heard over the chaos. Good people of Eldvik, hear me. Slowly, the crowd's attention turned to me. I drew upon the power of the mead of poetry, feeling the words flow through me with supernatural eloquence. I am Bjorn, a skald on a sacred quest. I have traveled the 9 worlds, gathering stories of hope and courage. Let me share them with you now, to steel your hearts against the coming storm. And so I began to weave a tapestry of tales. I spoke of the creation of the world from Ymir's body, of how even death could birth beauty. I recounted the adventures of Thor and his battles against the giants, showing how strength and wit could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. I shared the tragic tale of Baldur, but emphasized how his death ultimately brought the gods closer together. As I spoke, I felt the runestone pulse warmly in my pocket, and I drew upon the stories of Nastrund, showing how even those cursed and forgotten could hold on to hope. With each tale, I saw fear give way to resolve in the eyes of the villagers. Finally, I told them of my own journey, of the many beings I'd encountered who continued to fight for good in the face of darkness. When I finished, a profound silence had fallen over the crowd. An old woman stepped forward, her back straight and her eyes clear. Thank you, Skald. You've reminded us that even in the face of Ragnarok, we are not powerless. If the end comes, we shall meet it with courage. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The panic had subsided, replaced by a quiet determination. People began to disperse, returning to their homes and duties with renewed purpose. I turned back to Astrid, but the presence of Völva had left her. She blinked up at me in confusion. What happened? I had such strange dreams. I smiled gently. Rest now, little one. You've done a great service to your people. As the girl's parents led her away, I found myself alone in the village square, my mind reeling from the implications of Völva's words. My quest was more important than I'd ever imagined. Somehow the stories I was collecting were key to the fate of the 9 worlds themselves. Lost in thought, I almost didn't notice the tall, handsome man who now stood before me, a mischievous glint in his green eyes. Quite a performance, Skald, he said, slow clapping. I must say, I'm impressed. I tensed, recognizing him immediately from the tales. Loki. He grinned, bowing with a flourish. The one and only. I must say, you've caused quite a stir among the powers that be. A mortal, meddling with the fabric of fate. It's delicious chaos. I stood my ground, though my heart raced. What do you want, trickster? Loki circled me, his movements fluid and predatory. Oh, I think the question is, what do you want? You're amassing quite a bit of power, you know. Those stories you're collecting, the artifacts you're gathering. You could reshape the 9 worlds if you wanted. That's not my goal, I said firmly. No? Loki raised an eyebrow. Come now. Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. All that knowledge, all that power. Wouldn't you like to have some fun with it? For a moment, I felt a pull. The temptation to use my growing abilities for personal gain, or even just for a bit of mischief, was strong. But then I remembered the faces of those I'd met on my journey. The giant trapped in stone, the people of Nastrund, the villagers I'd just calmed. They were counting on me. I shook my head. My quest is to preserve and protect Loki, not to cause chaos. Loki's grin widened. But sometimes a little chaos is just what the 9 worlds need. Think about it. If you ever change your mind, well, I'll be around. With a wink, he vanished in a puff of green smoke, leaving behind only the faint scent of pine and a lingering sense of unease. I took a deep breath, centering myself. The encounter with Loki had shaken me, but it had also clarified my purpose. Whatever power I was gaining through my quest, I had to use it wisely. As I prepared to leave Eldvik, I gazed out at the fjord where the Kraken waited. The weight of my promises, to the people of Nastrund, to the villagers here, to all those whose stories I carried, settled on my shoulders. But it was a weight I was ready to bear. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by the looming threat of Ragnarok. The rune stone pulsed with an urgency I'd never felt before, growing warmer in my hand as I trudged through a mist-shrouded forest. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches reaching towards a sky I could no longer see. With each step, I felt as if I were walking deeper into the past, into the very foundations of the world. Suddenly the mist parted and I gasped. Before me stood the mightiest tree I'd ever beheld, its trunk wider than a village, its uppermost branches lost in the clouds. Yggdrasil, the world tree, in all its awe-inspiring glory. But it was not the tree's crown that drew me. My runestone pulled me downward towards the massive roots that plunged into the earth. As I approached, I noticed openings between the roots, like the entrances to countless caves. Well, I muttered to myself, I suppose there's nowhere to go but down. I chose an opening at random and stepped into the darkness. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was in a vast network of tunnels formed by the intertwining roots. The air here was thick with ancient magic, and I could hear whispers echoing from deep within the maze. As I ventured deeper, I began to notice strange symbols carved into the roots. They seemed to shift and change as I looked at them, telling fragments of stories older than time itself. I reached out to touch one, and suddenly, a vision flashed before my eyes. The void of Ginnungagap, where fire and ice met to form the giants. I jerked my hand back, breathless. These were not just any stories. They were the primordial tales of creation, etched into the very fabric of reality. Eager to learn more, I pressed on, touching root after root, absorbing fragments of cosmic lore. Audhumla, the primeval cow, licking the first god into existence. The brothers Odin, Vili, and Ve shaping the world from Ymir's corpse. The first humans, Ask and Embla, given life from trees. With each vision, I frantically scribbled notes in my book. These were the deepest roots of all our stories, the seeds from which all other tales grew. As I delved ever deeper into the maze, I became aware of a rhythmic sound, like the turning of an enormous loom. Following the noise, I emerged into a vast chamber at the heart of the root system. There, seated before a loom larger than any I'd ever seen, were 3 women. One appeared young and vibrant, another mature and strong, and the third ancient and wizened. I knew immediately who they must be, the Norns, weavers of fate. The youngest, Urdur, spoke first, her voice like a babbling brook. "Welcome, Skald. We've been expecting you." Verdandi, the middle Norn, nodded. Her voice was steady as a heartbeat. "Your journey has brought you to the very core of existence." Skuld, the eldest, fixed me with a penetrating gaze. When she spoke, it was with the finality of a tomb closing. "And now you must understand your role in the great tapestry." I bowed deeply. "Great Norns, I am honored. But I don't understand. What role do I play?" Urdur smiled. "Look closely at our weaving, Bjorn the Skald." I approached the loom, marveling at the intricate patterns of the tapestry. Countless threads of varying colors and thicknesses intertwined in a dizzying dance. But as I watched, I noticed a new thread being woven into the design, a thread that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Verdandi nodded towards the thread. "That is you, Bjorn. Your quest, your gathering of stories, is creating a new strand in the fabric of fate." Skuld's ancient fingers trace the path of my thread. "Your actions are reweaving the tapestry, offering new possibilities in the face of Ragnarok." I stared at the shimmering thread, my mind reeling. But I'm just a skald. How can my stories affect the fate of the 9 worlds? Urdur laughed, a sound like spring rain. "Oh, Bjorn, stories are the most powerful force in all of creation. They shape reality, mold belief, inspire action. By gathering and preserving these tales, you offer hope, the chance to write a new ending." Verdandi continued, But your task is not yet complete. To fully realize your thread's potential, you must collect one final story. Skald's voice grew heavy with portent. You must seek out Odin Allfather himself and record his tale. I felt the blood drain from my face. Odin? But how can I possibly reach him? The Norns spoke in unison, their voices blending into a sound like the turning of ages. Follow your path, Skald. It will lead you true. Before I could ask any more questions, the chamber began to fade around me. The last thing I saw was Skald's knowing smile as she snipped a thread on the loom. I found myself back in the tunnel of roots, my head spinning with all I'd learned. As I turned to make my way back to the surface, I noticed the symbols on the roots seemed clearer now, as if my encounter with the Norns had given me new insight into their meaning. When I finally emerged from the root maze, I was shocked to find the forest utterly changed. The mist had cleared, and the trees that had been ancient when I entered now seemed young and vibrant. A group of children played nearby, and when they saw me, they ran off in excitement. Moments later, a woman approached, her eyes wide with disbelief. It can't be. Bjorn the Skald? But you've been gone for years. I stared at her in confusion. Years? But I was only down there for a few hours. She shook her head. Bjorn, you disappeared into the roots of Yggdrasil 7 winters ago. We thought you lost to the other worlds. As the implications of her words sank in, I felt the weight of my quest more heavily than ever. Time had passed differently in the roots of the world tree, and the world had continued on without me. But my task was not yet done. I squared my shoulders, feeling the comforting weight of my book of stories. Then I have much to catch up on. But first, I must continue my journey. Can you tell me, have there been any sightings of Odin Allfather? The woman's eyes widened further. Odin? There are rumors. They say he's been seen near the great battlefield of Vigridr preparing for the final battle. I nodded, my path clear. Then that is where I must go. Thank you, good woman. As I set off towards Vigridr, my mind raced with all I had learned. The Norns' words echoed in my mind. My quest was reshaping fate itself. The stories I carried were not just tales, but threads of possibility, offering hope in the face of prophesied doom. And now, I sought the greatest story of all, the tale of Odin himself. As I walked, I felt the eyes of ravens upon me, and I wondered if the Allfather was already aware of my quest. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was determined to see my task through to the end, to weave a new thread of hope into the tapestry of the 9 worlds. The great ash tree Yggdrasil loomed before me, its branches stretching into realms beyond mortal comprehension. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the climb ahead. My quest had led me here to the very trunk of the world tree, seeking entrance to Asgard and an audience with Odin himself. As I placed my hand on the rough bark, I felt a surge of energy course through me. The stories I'd collected, the knowledge I'd gained, all seemed to resonate with the ancient power of Yggdrasil. With newfound strength, I began to climb. The ascent was perilous. More than once I found myself clinging to branches buffeted by otherworldly winds or navigating paths that seemed to shift and change before my eyes. But always my runestone guided me, pulsing warmly to indicate the right direction. After what felt like an eternity of climbing, I found myself before a shimmering golden gate. Heimdallr, the watchman of the gods, stood guard, his keen eyes fixed upon me. "Halt, mortal," his voice boomed. "What business have you in the realm of the Aesir?" I straightened, meeting his gaze. "I am Bjorn the Skald, on a quest to collect the stories of the 9 worlds. I seek an audience with Odin Allfather." Heimdallr's eyes narrowed. "Many seek the Allfather's wisdom. Few are worthy. You must prove yourself to the gods before you may enter." With those words, the gate dissolved, and I found myself in a great hall. Before me stood Thor, the god of thunder, his mighty hammer Mjolnir crackling with lightning. "So, Skald," Thor's voice rumbled like distant thunder, "you think yourself worthy to face Odin?" Let us test your strength, not of arm, but of tale. Tell me a story that captures the essence of battle, that makes even my warrior's heart race. Drawing upon the power of the mead of poetry, I began to weave a tale. I spoke of the battle between Thor and the giant Hrungnir, embellishing the story with vivid details of clashing weapons and earth-shaking blows. As I spoke, the very air seemed to crackle with energy, and I saw Thor's eyes light up with battle lust. When I finished, Thor let out a booming laugh. Well told, Skald. You capture the thrill of combat well. You may pass. The scene shifted, and I found myself in a verdant garden. Freya, the goddess of love and beauty, regarded me with curious eyes. Strength of arms is one thing, she said, her voice melodious. But what of matters of the heart? Share with me a tale of love so moving it would make even the hardest warrior weep. Once again, I delved into my collection of stories. I recounted the tragic tale of Sigurd and Brynhild, their love doomed by fate and trickery. As I spoke, flowers bloomed and withered around us, mirroring the emotions of the tale. When I finished, I saw tears glistening in Freya's eyes. You understand the power of love and loss, she said softly. You may continue. The tests continued, each god challenging me in their own domain. Tyr tested my sense of justice, Bragi my skill with words, Frigg my understanding of fate. With each challenge, I drew upon the stories I'd collected and the wisdom I'd gained on my journey. Finally, after what felt like days of testing, I found myself before a great wooden door. As I pushed it open, I entered a vast hall lined with golden shields. At the far end, seated upon a towering throne, was Odin himself. The Allfather's single eye fixed upon me, seeming to peer into the very depths of my soul. 2 ravens perched on his shoulders, and at his feet lay 2 great wolves. When he spoke, his voice was like the rumble of the earth itself. So, Bjorn the Skald, you have come far and overcome much. What would you ask of me? I swallowed hard but stood my ground. Allfather, I have traveled the 9 worlds collecting stories and wisdom, but my task is not complete without your tale. I challenge you to a contest of wisdom, with my entire collection of stories as the wager. A murmur ran through the hall, but Odin's expression remained impassive. After a long moment he nodded. Very well, Skald. Let us match wits. But know this. If you lose, not only will your stories be forfeit, but you shall remain in Asgard for eternity, unable to share your tales with the mortal world. And so began a battle of wits, unlike any other. For days we traded riddles, shared knowledge of runes and magic, and delved into the deepest mysteries of the cosmos. I drew upon every scrap of wisdom I'd gained in my travels, from the whispers of the world tree's roots to the secrets shared by the Norns. Odin proved to be a formidable opponent, his knowledge vast and deep. But as our contest wore on, I began to sense something beneath the Allfather's stern exterior, a glimmer of approval, perhaps even pride. As the sun rose on the 3rd day of our contest, Odin held up a hand. Enough, he said, and for the first time I saw him smile. You have proven yourself wise beyond your years, Bjorn the Skald. But tell me, do you understand why you are truly here? Confused, I shook my head. Odin leaned forward, his eye gleaming. This quest of yours, this gathering of stories, it was my design all along. The 9 worlds stand on the brink of Ragnarok, but prophecy is not set in stone. The tales you've collected, the wisdom you've gained, they are a new source of power, a chance to rewrite the fate of all worlds. I stared at him, stunned. But why me? I'm just a mortal skald. Odin's laugh was like the crackle of a flame. Just a skald? My boy, stories are the very fabric of reality. By gathering these tales, by weaving them together with your own thread, you've created a new form of magic, a power that might just be enough to prevent the twilight of the gods. As the implications of his words sank in, I felt a mix of awe and trepidation. So what happens now? Odin stood, towering over me. Now, Bjorn the Skald, you have a choice to make. You can return to Midgard with your stories, live out your life as a renowned storyteller. Or, I prompted, my heart racing. Or you can join us in the battle to come. Use the power you've gathered to help reshape the fate of the Nine Worlds. The choice is yours, but know this. Whatever you decide will become part of the greatest story ever told. As I stood there, the weight of the Nine Worlds seeming to rest on my shoulders, I realized that my journey had been leading to this moment all along. The stories I carried were not just tales, but threads of fate itself. And now I held the power to weave a new destiny for all of creation. The great hall of Valhalla fell silent as Odin, the Allfather, finished recounting his tale. It was a story of sacrifice and wisdom, of hanging from the world tree for 9 days and nights to gain knowledge of the runes. As the last word fell from his lips, my runestone began to pulse with an intensity I'd never felt before. And so, Bjorn the Skald, Odin's voice rumbled, you have heard my story. The final piece of your great work is now in place. Before my eyes, the runestone began to change. It grew and shifted, its surface rippling like water. Pages sprouted from its core, filled with intricate runes that seemed to dance and shift. In moments, I held in my hands not a stone, but a living book. The Poetic Edda, the culmination of my epic quest. The stories of the Nine Worlds are now bound together, Odin explained, his single eye gleaming. A new source of power to shape the fate of all realms. Use it wisely, Skald. With a mix of awe and trepidation, I accepted the book. I will, Allfather, I swear it. As I prepared to return to Midgard, each of the gods approached to bid me farewell. Thor clapped me on the shoulder, nearly sending me sprawling. Tell our tales well, little Skald. Let the mortals remember our strength. Freya kissed my brow, her touch like a spring breeze. And let them remember love, in all its forms. One by one, the gods gave their blessings, each adding their own power to the Edda I now carried. Finally, Odin himself stood before me. Remember, Bjorn, he said, his voice low and urgent. The future is not set. With every telling of these tales, you weave a new thread in the tapestry of fate. The power to reshape destiny is now in your hands. With those words ringing in my ears, I found myself back on Midgard. I stood atop the same hill where my journey had begun, what felt like a lifetime ago. But now, instead of an empty journal and a simple runestone, I carried the living heartbeat of the Nine Worlds in my hands. As I made my way back to my village, I was astounded by the reception that awaited me. Word of my quest had spread far and wide, it seemed. People lined the streets, cheering and calling my name. Bjorn the Skald has returned, the hero of the Nine Worlds. Tell us your tales, Great One. I was ushered to the great hall where the village elders awaited. The chief, his beard now more gray than when I'd left, embraced me warmly. Welcome home, Bjorn, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We had feared you lost to the other worlds, but the rumors of your deeds have reached even our small corner of Midgard. Please, share with us the wisdom you've gained. And so, before the assembled villagers, I opened the Poetic Edda and began to speak. As I recounted the tales of gods and giants, of heroes and monsters, I felt a strange power flowing through me. The very air seemed to thicken with magic, and I saw in the eyes of my audience that they were not just hearing my words, but experiencing the stories as if they were there. I spoke of the creation of the world from Ymir's body, and the hall seemed to shake with the cosmic forces I described. I told of Thor's battles against the giants, and thunder rumbled in the distance. When I recounted the tragic tale of Baldur's death, there wasn't a dry eye in the hall. As I shared the stories I'd collected, I began to understand what Odin had meant. With each telling, I could feel the fabric of reality shifting, strengthening. The gods and their deeds were no longer distant myths, but living, breathing parts of the world around us. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. I traveled from village to village, sharing the tales of the Edda. Everywhere I went, I was hailed as a hero, Bjorn the Skald, spoken with the same reverence as the names of the gods themselves. But with each telling, I also felt a growing weight of responsibility. I began to understand the true power I wielded. These weren't just stories. They were the building blocks of reality itself. And as Odin had said, the future was not set in stone. It all came to a head on a cold winter's night, in a village near the great plains of Vigrid, where it was said the final battle of Ragnarok would take place. As I neared the end of my recitation, a palpable sense of dread had fallen over the gathered crowd. The tale of the twilight of the gods, the destruction of the 9 worlds, weighed heavily on all our hearts. But as I prepared to speak the final verses, I hesitated. I thought of all I had seen and learned on my journey, of the hope in the eyes of the people of Nastrand, of the wisdom of the Norns, of Odin's words about reshaping destiny. In that moment, I made a choice. Instead of reciting the prophecy of doom, I began to weave a new tale. I spoke of unity between the realms, of gods and giants setting aside their differences. I told of a great council, where all beings of the 9 worlds came together to forge a new future. As I spoke, I felt power surging through me like never before. The Edda in my hands began to glow, its pages turning on their own as new verses wrote themselves before my eyes. The very air crackled with energy, and I saw visions of the future unfolding around me. I saw Thor and the world serpent engaged not in battle, but in a contest of strength that ended in mutual respect. I saw the wolf Fenrir, not as a monster to be feared, but as a protector of the wild places. I saw Loki, his mischief turned to innovation, bringing new wonders to gods and mortals alike. As I spoke the final word of this new prophecy, a blinding light filled the hall. When it faded, I found myself changed. Power coursed through my veins, and I knew I had become something more than mortal. A living conduit for the magic of the gods, a bridge between realms. The villagers stared at me in awe, and I heard whispers of God-speaker and Fate Weaver rippling through the crowd. But it was the sky outside that truly showed the magnitude of what had occurred. The stars themselves had shifted, forming new constellations that told of peace and unity rather than apocalyptic battles. As dawn broke, I stepped outside to find a world transformed. The air was sweeter, the colors more vivid. In the distance, I saw impossible things. Giants and gods walking side by side, dark elves emerging from their caverns to trade with humans, Valkyries soaring through the sky on peaceful missions. A young girl approached me, her eyes wide with wonder. "Great Bjorn," she asked, "what happens now?" I knelt down to meet her gaze, smiling softly. "Now, little one, we write a new story, one of peace, of understanding between all the realms, and you, all of you, will help me tell it." As I stood, I felt the weight of the 9 worlds on my shoulders, but it was a weight I was ready to bear. With the poetic Edda in my hands and the power of stories in my heart, I set out to guide this new age of harmony.